Chapter 9:18. Song Ying, who had just returned to the room, immediately walked behind a screen in the room. She took off her coat and top, then bent down. Her hands were behind her back as she reached for the buttons of her underwear, but it seemed that she had rested too well in the hospital these past few days. Song Ying felt that she seemed to have gained some weight. The moment the buttons were unbuttoned, the jade rabbit in front of her chest bounced, and Song Ying exhaled comfortably. She touched the marks on her body due to the tightness of her underwear and frowned with slight distress. She was really so fat that she had to change her underwear at home. This size. Song Ying shook her head. She was still waiting for the bathtub to turn on the water. So she simply put on her bathrobe, poured a glass of water, walked in front of the table, and turned on her laptop. Song Ying drank the water and sat down, at the same time looking at the situation of the Song family's various industries on the stock market. But suddenly, Song Ying choked on her own saliva. She coughed a few times, then hurriedly tapped on the keyboard. The interface on the laptop screen changed rapidly. After a while, Song Ying rubbed her eyes in a daze, then subconsciously reached out to pat her laptop, with a look of disbelief on her face. Damn! Could it be that I've been poisoned? Our stocks, all of them, have all reached the upper limit? Meow? Just then, Song Ying's phone rang. It was a call from the person in charge of a branch of the Song dynasty group overseas. Miss Ying. Oh my God. We dug out oil. Can you believe it? It's really oil. What? Song Ying's little mouth opened slightly. Just then, another international long-distance call came in. It was another high-ranking manager of the Song dynasty group. It was a female. Miss Ying, we found gold in a stone mine in Cuba. Oh my God! What? Song Ying opened her little mouth and blinked her eyes. But at this moment, another phone call came in crazily. Song Ying subconsciously switched over. You have some good news, right? Miss Ying, you already know? A surprised voice came from the other side. Tell me about it. Song Ying's eyelids couldn't help but twitch a few times. Sure enough, she really saw a ghost today. The team that we sponsored was disqualified because the opponent's player was found to have used banned drugs. They automatically advanced to the next round. Ah? Song Ying gave a silly "oh" before she remembered that this was the manager of a football team sponsored by the Song family. But she still felt a little incredulous and couldn't help pinching her own face. Have I used up all the good karma I've accumulated in half my life? Why are all the good things coming? Song Tianyu was not the only one who was surprised. Of course, fifth uncle, who was accompanying him, was also surprised. At this moment, Mr. Blind suddenly said, Master Song, can you let Mr. Fifth wait outside? The meaning of Mr. Blind's words could not be more obvious. That is, he might say something that only the person in charge of the Song family, Song Tianyu, and Luocha would know about. Without waiting for Song Tianyu to speak, fifth uncle nodded and walked out. He closed the door of the morning hall and stood guard, not allowing anyone to enter. At this moment, Song Tianyu frowned. Mister, what do you mean? You said that Luocha is an honorable person? He recalled what Mr. Blind had said to him that night. It was about the prosperity of the Song family. And the key to this was Luocha, who had just returned to the family not long ago. At least on the same level, or perhaps. Mr. Blind hesitated for a moment and suddenly said, Master Song, do you know that life and death are determined by fate and riches and honor are determined by heaven? It's an old saying. Song Tianyu nodded. Mr. Blind said, My eyes and I were born unable to see. But the heavens took my eyes and gave me something in return. I can see the numerology. Master Song, your numerology, young Master Song's numerology and Miss Song Ying's numerology, I can see them all. Only this young Master Luocha's numerology, I can't see it. Numerology, or fate, was something illusory. However, Master Song didn't doubt Mr. Blind's words. He only asked with a frown, Why can't I see it? Mr. Blind said slowly, Taoism's numerology is extremely profound, but in fact, numerology is traceable. Some people are born into rich families and have immense blessings. They naturally have no worries for their entire lives. This is because they are favored by heaven and earth. Some people are poor and have bad luck. This is because they are spurned by heaven and earth. This is also something that can be seen. Most people can see it. There is also a saying in Taoism, which is to jump out of the 3 realms and not be bound by the 5 elements. The numerology of such a person cannot be seen because such a person's life is no longer within the normal operations of heaven and earth. Their lives are a variable. This variable can also be called freedom, which is what we Taoists call carefree. Then Luoqiu. Song Tianyu looked at Luoqiu in astonishment. He saw Luoqiu looking calm and relaxed. He didn't show any nervousness or uneasiness. His calm expression made Song Tianyu feel ashamed of his inferiority. There is also a type of numerology that cannot be seen. Mr. Blind suddenly said, "This type of fate is completely bound with heaven and earth. When heaven and earth change, the fate will change, and when the fate changes, heaven and earth will also change. However, if one has such a fate, they can already be called a saint. As for young Master Luoqiu, sorry, old Master Song, I am unable to determine which type it is. The only thing I can determine is that this young Master Luoqiu is indeed an honorable person. Otherwise, the Song clan's luck wouldn't be so prosperous just because he worshipped his ancestors. His worship is equivalent to the heaven and earth worshipping him. Simply put, the Song clan is blessed by heaven." Hearing this, Song Tianyu was so shocked that he couldn't speak for a long time. On the other hand, Luoqiu frowned after hearing this. He didn't think so much. Worshipping one's ancestors came from the heart. It was probably an instinct. As for the saying that worshipping the Song clan's ancestors would make the Song clan's luck flourish, Luoqiu didn't think too much about it. But what this Mr. Blind said, Qing Xiazi, should be a Taoist name. Among the people that Luoqiu knew, there were some who had their own Taoist names. Yang Taizi, who was hiding, was one of them. At this moment, Song Tianyu slowly looked towards Luoqiu. He saw Luoqiu shaking his head confusedly, indicating that he didn't understand. Song Tianyu hurriedly said, "Mr. Blind is a strange person. You should have seen the difference between Mr. Blind and ordinary people when the zombies were in the hospital, right?" Luoqiu nodded. Mr. Blind said slowly, "Young Master Luoqiu, I know you're very confused. There's a kind of people who are favored by heaven and earth. They can do whatever they want and get whatever they want easily. It's like they're blessed by God. They don't know why they're so lucky, but that's how they are. And judging from the change in Song family's luck brought by young Master Luoqiu's action just now, it seems that you're one of the best." Luoqiu kept silent for a moment. He didn't have any doubts in his heart. Instead, he suddenly had some ideas because of Mr. Blind's words. For example, if someone wanted to buy a lifetime of glory and wealth, could he also do the same and be done with it? So thrifty. While he was still thinking, Mr. Blind's action made Luoqiu really surprised. This Mr. Blind, who was called Qing Xiazi, actually bowed 3 times to Luoqiu, making Luoqiu, who was always calm, somewhat overwhelmed. "Mr. Blind, why are you doing this? You can't. Old Master Song hurriedly supported Mr. Blind. This man was at least half a century older than him. He was simply like a living immortal. Mr. Blind said indifferently, "Cultivators like us understand the will of heaven. We'll take advantage of the situation and also respect ghosts and gods. In every dynasty, even if it's a powerful person, when they meet a supreme being in the human world, they'll also pay their respects. Young Master Luoqiu is such a noble person. If Qing Xiazi doesn't pay his respects, he'll be harming his own karma. I can't. Looks like I can't stay in Song family anymore." Luoqiu saw this and felt that it was a pity. "Old Master Song, if there's nothing else, I'd like to go back to my room and change my clothes. Is that okay? Luoqiu said softly. Song Tianyu hesitated for a moment and didn't know how to respond. But Luoqiu nodded with a smile at this time and went straight out. Mr. This. Song Tianyu said 3 times in a row, but he couldn't say anything. Mr. Blind sighed and suddenly said, Old Master Song, before I met this young Master Luoqiu, I thought that after 1,000 years of accumulation, the Emperor's aura of Shinryu of your Song family might have gathered on him. That's why the Song family has such an unimaginable power. But now, it seems like that's not the case. I'm afraid that even with the tolerance of the entire Song family, they won't be able to bear it. I didn't expect. Mister, what didn't you expect? Old Master Song asked nervously. Mr. Blind said indifferently, I didn't expect that I'd meet such a noble person one day. I thought that such a noble person was only made up by the ancient records of the sect. But after meeting him today, I didn't live in vain, I really didn't live in vain. So, mister, you're actually just speaking from the books. Old Master Song felt that the image of Mr. Blind in his heart was starting to change. However, no matter what, this blind eccentric's ancient bronze sword was real. Old Master Song, with the Song family's 1,000 years of tolerance, we can't bear such a noble person. Mr. Blind looked at the many memorial tablets in front of the morning hall. If he's willing to stay, then stay. If he's not willing to stay, then don't force him. You have to know that some things can't be forced. It's futile. Let me think about it. Song Tianyu lowered his eyebrows and pondered. Suddenly, he asked, Mister, may I ask if I can have an heir? Mr. Blind frowned and pondered for a moment. A noble person's life is too hard. Ordinary women can't bear it. Old Master Song asked again, Mister, what do you think of Song Ying? Mr. Blind pondered for a moment and slowly said, Miss Ying has great fortune and great fortune. She's been smart since she was young. Her intelligence is outstanding, and she's favored by the heavens. Furthermore, she's born in the Song family with 1,000 years of history. She also has the blessing of the dynasty. Perhaps she can give it a try. However, I really can't make a definite deduction. If my senior brother is here, he might be able to give you a more definite answer. After all, my senior brother is the successor of the previous generation of my sect. I'm just a failure. Song Tianyu said, Mister, are you talking about the true successor of the cotton clothing sect, Heavenly Master Lai? Mr. Blind was silent. He seemed to have recalled some past events and slowly said, I'm only Heaven's Eye, while my senior brother is Heaven's Heart. My humble abode wasn't as simple as it looked from the outside. There was a lot of space under my humble abode. Although she wasn't shaved bald, didn't wear strange clothes, and didn't have a tail attached to her, she was still imprisoned in the end. Gloria hugged her knees and sat on the bed. The room wasn't big, and there wasn't much space to move around. There were many soft bags on the walls, which were used to prevent bump. In general, it looked like a room for a mental patient. After returning from the ruins of the ancient castle, she was brought to this place. Counting the time, more than 3 days had passed. For the past few days, no one had appeared. Because of the vampires, no one had brought her food. If it wasn't for the fact that this iron door made of steel couldn't be used because its power was cut off, Gloria sighed, knowing that her idea was somewhat unrealistic. But at this time, the prisoner's door suddenly opened. It was Song Howren who came in, the young master of the Song family, who always had a cynical smile on his face, was holding a big bowl in his hand. Gloria smelled the smell of blood. This bowl was filled with blood. This made Gloria feel hungry all of a sudden, and the look in her eyes changed because of this. Song Howren smilingly put the bowl on the only table in the room. In fact, it was just a steel plate sunk into the wall. It's fresh. Someone in the kitchen cut her wrist, and there's a lot of blood. Song Howren leaned against the wall at this time, raised his hand, and looked at Gloria, who turned her face to the side, Oh, it seems that your feeding cycle is longer than I thought? Idiot, do you think you can fool me with the blood of some animals? Gloria said coldly, You'd better let me go and imprison me. If I'm found out, you'll be in big trouble. Song Howren shrugged and said, But I've been imprisoning you for several days, and nothing bad has happened. On the contrary, I don't know why I'm in a particularly good mood now, and I feel refreshed. You're about to die. Gloria snorted coldly. Miss Investigator, you shouldn't be in an important position among your kind, right? Song Howren suddenly said softly, Don't ask me why I know, let me guess. Gloria stared at Song Howren. He said indifferently, I value the lives of my own subordinates very much. If something happens to them, I'll take action immediately. I only feel that there's no need to save those unimportant and untrusted subordinates. Besides, for me, if I don't hear from my companions in 2 days, I can't just wait like this. You think you're smart. Gloria still sneered. Song Howren disagreed. Let me think again. As an investigator, there should be a woman who is very important to you. Gloria's expression changed slightly. Song Howren said, I don't think you're really afraid that I'll shave your hair. What you're afraid of is that I'll expose you, because I said that I'll post the photos on YouTube. Your panic really started at this time. By the way, why are you afraid? Are you afraid that your appearance will be seen by others? Generally speaking, that should be the case. In other words, there must be a lot of people who know you, and I'm talking about vampires who know you. You're afraid of being seen by them. Looking at Gloria's silent appearance, Song Howren spread his hands and said, But, although we are very afraid of being made fun of by our companions, most of the time, we won't go to the extent of not keeping a secret because of the fear of being made fun of. But if you reveal your identity because of this, well, I think most of the viewers on YouTube won't know that you're a vampire. He suddenly walked to the bedside and stared at Gloria condescendingly. What are you afraid of? Afraid that your companions will know that you failed the mission? There will be punishment, right? And this kind of punishment will be very uncomfortable for you. Although you deliberately hide it, I can feel your anxiety. Who is this woman? Gloria's expression became nervous second by second. The moment Song Howren reached out his hand, Gloria's expression changed drastically. From Song Howren's hand, a necklace dangled down, and on the pendant of the necklace was a small photo. Give it back. Gloria suddenly threw herself forward. It was just that her power had long been sealed by the wooden sword implanted in her body. Right now, she was like a real weak woman. Naturally, she wasn't a match for someone like Song Howren who mixed in with mercenaries. Song Howren easily grabbed Gloria's hands, lifted her up, and pressed her whole body against the wall. How about we make a deal? Gloria struggled a few times and stared at Song Howren. Song Howren smiled and said, Tell me everything about the 13 clans, and I'll give it back to you. Also, I'll bring you real human blood. Don't worry, there are so many death row prisoners in this country, no one will care if 1 or 2 are missing. You're really the worst man. Gloria fiercely cursed Song Howren. Young Master Song just turned the necklace in his hand and whistled, Thank you for the compliment. Chapter 9:19. Humans were strange creatures, and the human heart was the most complicated thing. Sometimes they couldn't understand their own thoughts. Perhaps they would still be confused until the end of their lives. Alec Pharmaceuticals was a pharmaceutical company acquired by the Song Dynasty Group, and the profits were quite good. But in fact, the Song family acquired Alec Pharmaceuticals to take care of their own village. When soldiers were injured, they needed a lot of drugs, and some drugs were hard to find on the market. Instead of spending energy to find the drugs from various channels, it was better to produce the drugs themselves. Of course, as the owner of a pharmaceutical company, he naturally had a department that specialized in researching and developing more effective drugs. Among these departments, there was a special group that specialized in analyzing the pills given by Mr. Blind. At the same time, Mr. Blind also held a position in this group. In the special R&D room of Alec Pharmaceuticals, a novel thing was being studied these days. To be precise, they were studying a zombie that was caught alive. This was a project that made the researchers feel both scared and excited, and it was also a top-secret project. The researchers here all knew that if they entered this special group, they would basically be cut off from the outside world. Of course, the Song family didn't treat them badly. Their families were well taken care of outside, so they could work here with peace of mind. Today, Songda came here again, with a sealed box in his hand, and it was covered with a piece of cloth. Why was it said again? Of course, because Songda came here every day these days, and the researchers were already used to it. In fact, the researchers had more or less taken the blood of Songda and his brothers for research. After all, Songda and his brothers had superhuman physiques, which was very attractive. But it turned out that in addition to being very healthy, they were genuine human beings. Two men in guard uniforms were standing outside a special room at this time. They were holding submachine guns with good firepower in their hands, and they were ready for battle and didn't dare to relax. These two were from the village. Instructor. The two saw Songda coming at this time, and hurriedly saluted. Songda simply nodded, and then waved his hand. The two guards understood and directly opened the steel door behind them. They didn't follow Songda in, but continued to guard outside the steel door. In fact, there was another even thicker door in the room, so Songda only entered through a side door. However, there was still a lot of equipment here. Songda began to teleport the protective clothing and arrived in front of the second door. The surroundings immediately sprayed some water mist towards him. It was a special disinfectant. Before going in, it needed to be thoroughly disinfected. Before coming out, it also needed to be thoroughly disinfected. This was strongly requested by the researchers, because there was a living zombie locked inside. No one knew what kind of bacteria was brought in from the outside and how it would react to the zombies. No one knew if the bacteria carried by the zombies really couldn't be spread through the air. Songda waited impatiently for a moment until the electronic voice indicated that the disinfection had been completed and the second door in front of him indicated that it could be opened. Then, he frowned and walked in. This room was dark, but after Songda came in, it became unusually bright, almost pure white. At the same time, a loud roar came at this time, and at the same time, there was a crazy slapping sound. In the center of the room, there was a huge, specially treated square glass cover, and inside this glass cover was the only zombie that was caught alive: Natasha. Natasha's body had a certain degree of decay compared to when she was in the hospital. Her skin was already gray, and her appearance had changed a lot. At this time, her whole body was squeezed on the glass cover, and her hands were constantly clawing on the cover. She was looking at Songda, but Songda wasn't sure if she was really looking at him. There were a lot of instruments placed around the cover. These instruments were for monitoring Natasha's various activities. Songda didn't understand much, and didn't pay much attention to it. He just walked in front of Natasha without fear. Between the two, there was almost only a few centimeters of glass between them. Songda silently looked at Natasha's appearance at this time. After a while, Songda stepped back a few steps, and then walked in front of a table outside the cover. He opened the thing he had been carrying, which was actually a portable pet house. Inside was a fainted wild cat. Songda put the wild cat on the table, and the table opened automatically. There was a transmission channel inside the glass enclosure. Songda pressed the start button, and the transmission system automatically operated. Soon after, the floor inside the cover automatically opened at the same time, and the wild cat had already appeared inside the cover. Natasha didn't say anything and walked towards the wild cat, and began to eat the wild cat raw. This scene, naturally, wouldn't make people feel comfortable. Looking at Natasha's appearance at this time, Songda had a very strange thought in his heart. Perhaps he shouldn't have caught it alive, if he had killed it with one slap at that time. Or, in other words, if he could have sent her out more thoroughly in the cellar maze at that time. People were strange. If they didn't have the intention to save at the beginning, there would be nothing to think about. But at the beginning, if it was already within the scope of recognition, an inexplicable sense of guilt would appear. Song sighed subconsciously, feeling that his thoughts were somewhat superfluous. When he was still learning in the temple with many bald people, the master often said that his 6 senses were not pure. Songda didn't take it seriously, but now it seemed that it was true. There were many evil creatures in the world of mortals. After Natasha finished eating the wild cat, Songda silently watched for a while, and then turned around and left the room. When he went outside, he naturally needed to disinfect again. After taking off the protective suit, Songda didn't immediately leave, but sat in the place where he changed his clothes, and no one knew what he was thinking. Suddenly, Songda took out something from his clothes, an ID. This was Natasha's ID, which Songda later found in the hospital, but the smiling girl in the ID photo had now become a monster. Looking at the detailed information on the ID, Songda didn't know what to think. He frowned, suddenly stood up, and hurriedly left, even without saying goodbye to the 2 guards outside the door. Therefore, the monitoring organization is composed of members of the 13 clans. This was almost a mode of 1 question and 1 answer. The following conversation between Song Hauran and Gloria. Song Hauran knew that if it weren't for the threat, Gloria wouldn't be willing to reveal more information. Even if she revealed it now, she wouldn't reveal more information after Song Hauran's question. Therefore, her answer was very careful and cautious. What she said was not really secret information. It was the information that the non-humans in the dark world were familiar with. It was just that for humans, most of it was still an unknown territory. Sure enough, this world is much more interesting than I thought. Song Hauran showed a satisfied smile at this time. At this time, Gloria said coldly, "If you don't have anything to ask, you'd better give it back to me. Don't bring trouble to the people behind you because of your curiosity. That day in the treasure vault, which blind man gave you a warning, did you forget? That's why I came quietly." Song Hauran shrugged. Of course, I think he should have guessed that I would do this. But in fact, that Mr. didn't stop me more. So maybe he acquiesced? "Give it back to me." Gloria gritted her teeth and said, "I still have a lot of questions, don't worry." Song Hauran laughed jokingly. "Anyway, you don't intend to confess to yourself, so I can only ask myself. But I know a lot of things today I need to digest and think about a few questions. I will ask you properly tomorrow." Gloria was helpless. Smart men had always been very scary, especially smart men with low moral standards. They were even scarier. "It's almost time, I should go back to the family banquet." Song Hauran smiled at this time, but he didn't leave immediately. Gloria couldn't wait for this hateful guy to leave now, but Song Hauran picked up the bowl full of blood. The blood in it was naturally not the blood of a chef who accidentally cut his hand, but duck blood from the kitchen. Song Hauran poured the blood into the toilet of the cell, washing the bowl of duck blood away. This kind of cell was originally used to imprison people. Of course, there was the most basic equipment, and there was a wash basin next to it. Song Hauran seemed to be in a good mood, washing the bowl slowly. Gloria's eyes were almost spitting fire. At this time, Song Hauran suddenly turned around and asked curiously, "I suddenly thought of a question. You said that vampires only drink blood and don't eat. Then, do you actually go to the toilet?" At the same time, Song Hauran moved his finger, pointing at a surveillance camera in the corner of the room. Gloria clenched her teeth, showing a hateful look. Song Hauran shrugged indifferently, laughing. "Actually, I haven't opened this thing at all. Don't worry, I'm not interested in peeping, because if I want to see, I'll do it openly." Gloria simply ignored it. This man didn't have the so-called bottom line of morality at all. In fact, it's very easy for you to expose yourself. At this time, Song Hauran walked back to the table, put down the clean bowl, and said to Gloria with his back to her, Although you look cold on the outside, it's very easy to see through a forced indifference. Gloria was startled, not because of Song Howren's words, but because she smelled a familiar smell at this time, which made her feel hungry instantly. Here's your dinner. Enjoy it, Miss Investigator. Song Howren turned around with a smile. Song Howren's right hand was grabbing his left wrist. His left palm was bleeding, and there was a small dagger between Song Howren's fingers. Then, I won't disturb you. Song Howren left like this. Gloria waited for a long time, but this hateful guy didn't come back again. The smell of blood in the air almost pushed her endurance to the limit. She had actually come to the table, and looked at the half-filled bowl of blood. Hunger made her instinctively open her mouth, and her palm trembled uncontrollably. Gloria cursed in grief and indignation. Damn it! I'll tear you into pieces. Gloria suddenly bit her lips, resolutely picked up the bowl, and walked to the toilet. But the moment she opened her palm, Gloria suddenly stopped. The blood slanted to the edge of the bowl, but the tension of the liquid prevented the blood from leaking out. Gloria took a deep breath, raised her head and drank half the bowl of blood in one gulp. Gloria's hands dropped naturally at this time. The bowl fell from her palm and broke instantly. She raised her head and closed her eyes. After a long time, she silently walked to the single bed, lay down, and slightly curled up her body. Why is she so honest? Gloria hugged her head and closed her eyes. After leaving the prison room, Song Howren returned to the ground and planned to go to the dining room. He was in a good mood, whistling while looking at the palm of his left hand. The wound had stopped bleeding after he came out. There was only one wound that had just healed. Song Howren gently touched the wound with his finger. The healing speed was beyond his imagination. Song Howren whistled again and said to himself, "Extraordinary, young master." At this time, a servant of this humble house walked over. She was very young, around 20 years old, and looked quite pretty. Song Howren narrowed his eyes and nodded, saying, "Aya, did anyone tell you that you're especially cute today?" Annoying. The servant, who knew this young master's personality too well, immediately rolled her eyes at Song Howren and left just like that. Of course, young Master Song wouldn't let it go. His palm quickly slapped the servant's perky butt, causing her to roll her eyes again. Satisfied, he twirled Gloria's necklace with his finger and walked out of the long corridor. Aya, what a coincidence, little Luo Chio. What surprised Song Howren was that he didn't walk for long before running into Luochio and Gan Hong, who would basically be inseparable from Luochio during this period of time. I just changed my clothes and was about to go to the dining room. Luochio nodded and glanced at Song Howren. Suddenly he said, "You seem to be in a good mood, as bright as the sun." The sun? Song Howren was stunned. He instinctively raised his head and saw the sunset. "I prefer the sunset." Oh, speaking of the sunset, I suddenly remembered an adventure story. Come, do you want to hear it? Song Howren directly put his arm around Luochio's shoulder, then turned his head and glanced at Gan Hong. "I'll borrow your young master's. You don't mind, right?" Gan Hong sighed helplessly. "Go ahead." "What kind of story?" Luochio asked casually, helping to resolve the situation. Song Howren smiled and said, "It's a story about an adventure in a snowy mountain. It starts at sunset." "Let me tell you," Gan Hong shook her head. She just couldn't understand. The young master really liked to tell his adventure stories to women, but he almost never focused on men. Why did he like to tell Master Chiu stories so much? Chapter 920. Luochio and Song Howren appeared in front of the dining room, talking and laughing. Coincidentally, the two of them met Song Ying. Song Ying greeted Song Howren politely, then snorted at Luochio before running into the dining room. Old Master Song hadn't arrived yet, so there were many rules in the ancient family. For example, before the elders arrived, the younger generation couldn't eat first. Song Ying moved the stool next to Song Howren and Luochio to Song Howren and Luochio. She didn't want Luochio to be left out, So when Song Haoran and Luo Qiu sat down, she started talking. Rising limit? Oil? Gold mine? Song Haoran listened to what Song Ying found unbelievable, but he also found it unbelievable. Yes. Let's not talk about these things, there are many other small things. Song Ying seemed to be in a good mood. You don't know, but before I came to the dining room, I received more than 10 calls, all of them telling me the good news. Today is really my lucky day. Speaking of which, I was in a good mood just now. Song Haoran smiled. Today, the two of you were discharged from the hospital. It's true that people are in high spirits because of happy events. Although they were discussing, Luoqiu was thinking about the conversation he had with Mr. Blind in the morning hall. The power of adding a few incense sticks seemed to be a little strong. Oh, everyone is here. At this moment, old Master Song walked out slowly with fifth uncle, but Mr. Blind was nowhere to be seen. After Song Tianyu sat down, he glanced at his descendants and revealed a kind smile. Before we eat, I have something to say. Listen. Only then did Song Ying move the stool back to her seat. Song Tianyu was a person who abided by the rules, so he naturally hoped that others would do the same. Dad, what's the matter? Song Haoran asked curiously. Song Tianyu said, I've already set the date to go to China. It's a week later. This time, we're going back mainly to worship our ancestors. I haven't been back for many years, and I don't know what our Song family's ancestral grave looks like now. Worship our ancestors? So sudden? Song Ying was stunned. She had only been back to the Song family's ancestral grave once, and that was when she was young. It's not a last-minute decision, Song Tianyu said. Actually, after Haoran found Luoqiu, I already had this idea. It just so happens that the matters here are almost settled, and our traditional Chinese New Year is coming soon. So, I'm planning to go back to China this time. We'll celebrate the Lunar New Year. Of course, there are many of the people's family, of course. You know that if you go back there will be many people, sizes. Besides, the company's, of the company's company, of the company's company. And the matter in the company I group. As for the matters of the group, you just need to make some arrangements. The whole group won't be in a mess during this trip. Song Ying could only nod. Okay, I'll make the arrangements later. She knew that once Song Tianyu made a decision, he couldn't change it. This was the supreme authority of the entire Song family. With that said, Song Ying glared at Luoqiu, who had an innocent look on his face. Luoqiu was stunned for a moment, then he smiled in response. Song Ying was so angry that her teeth itched. Luoqiu, do you have a problem? Song Tianyu suddenly asked. Worshipping the ancestral grave was a matter of course. Luoqiu had no reason to refuse, so he simply nodded and agreed. In this case, he might have to move the club again. However, the club itself was a place where people could move around. Yu Yi said that she had experience of traveling around the world for a period of time after she took office. Where is the Song family's ancestral grave? Luoqiu asked. Taiyan in Shandong. Song Tianyu smiled and said, Our grandfather is actually near Mount Tai, but very few people know this. Because in my father's generation, we were basically active in the south, and it was from there that we made our fortune again. Luoqiu nodded, expressing his understanding. But Mount Tai seemed to be a bit coincidental. Now, it was not long before February 2nd. Luoqiu? Luoqiu? Song Tianyu suddenly called. Is there still a problem? What Mr. Blind said in the morning hall made Song Tianyu worried. Although he looked quite calm on the outside, he couldn't avoid paying attention to Luoqiu in his heart. Undoubtedly, old Master Song didn't want the bloodline of the Song family to be separated. Even if Luoqiu wasn't a noble, he would protect this child forever. If this child had some ambition, he would try his best to realize it. But now, knowing that Luoqiu could bring great fortune to the Song family, Old Master Song's intention to keep him was naturally stronger. He also cared more about Luocchio's thoughts. He never thought that Luocchio would leave the Song family. Nothing, I just suddenly remembered that I haven't been to Mount Tai. Luocchio smiled casually. Well, I can take this opportunity to have a good tour. Song Tianyu laughed. If possible, you can call your father's second wife. Since she married into the Song family, she should be part of the ancestral worship. Let me think about it. Luocchio didn't refuse at once. Instead, he wondered what Renziling's reaction would be if she knew that he had found such a powerful family like the Song family after going out for a while. She would probably be scared out of her wit. Okay, I won't force you. You have your own considerations. Song Tianyu nodded and then made the decision. Then this matter is settled. Get ready to eat. The kitchen made a lot of delicious food today. Eat more. Song Ying didn't raise her hand to say that it was finally time to eat. She just felt that her grandfather's attitude toward Luocchio seemed to be much better. He was already tolerant enough, but now he was almost spoiling. Damn it. Fruits, fresh fruits. Bananas, cucumbers, carrots. Fried dough twist, an authentic Chinese snack, fried dough twist. The authentic fried dough twist. The crowd was shouting on this street called Zhonghua Street. This was the only place where Song De felt a little homely in a foreign country. Of course, it wasn't too strong. Just the fact that he could see a lot of Chinese people was enough reason to walk around. Of course, Song De didn't come here to walk around. Song De took out Natasha's ID from his clothes and looked at the house number in front of the building. The rent of the houses here was very low. In fact, many locals and foreigners who worked here rented houses. Song De didn't expect that the people who attended the vineyard wine party would actually live in such a relatively ordinary place. 121, here? Song De raised his head. In front of him was a 5-story cement house. Most of the buildings in Zhonghua Street were only a few stories high, so the cement house in front of him didn't look special, and the specific room number. Song De thought for a while and finally decided to walk in. But at this time, a woman in her mid-20s happened to come out of the corridor. This woman's eyebrows were somewhat similar to Natasha's. The woman's movements didn't change. She held the crutch with both hands and carefully walked down the stairs with difficulty. Song De frowned. But at this time, the woman's crutch missed. She instantly lost her balance and was about to roll down the stairs. Be careful. Song De took 2 steps forward and caught the woman firmly. A pair of crutches slipped down the stairs and fell on the street outside. Song De glanced at the woman and saw that she looked haggard, as if she hadn't had a good rest for several days. There was even a worried look on her face. Song De helped the woman down and leaned against the bottom of the stairs. He also helped her pick up the pair of crutches. Thank you. The woman bowed her head and said, then walked away from Song De. Where do you want to go? Song De asked subconsciously. Looking for someone. The woman turned around and said quickly, my sister has been missing for several days. I want to find her. Song De chased after her. He already had some guesses in his mind and just wanted to confirm something. Your sister's name, is it Natasha? You've seen her. The woman instantly grasped Song Da's arm excitedly. You've seen her, haven't you? Song De looked around and nodded. I do have some information about Natasha. But can we find another place? This is not the place to talk about it. Song De had been here for many years, but he was not very proficient in the language here. Although he could understand it easily, he still spoke slowly and inaccurately. The woman hesitated for a moment. Song De had to take out Natasha's ID card. The woman's hand trembled slightly when she saw it. After taking Natasha's ID card from Song Da's hand, she suddenly fainted. Song De was shocked and hurriedly reached out to catch it. He glanced at the woman's closed eyes, then pinched her wrist and touched her forehead. The woman's body was very hot. It seemed that she had a high fever. After an unknown amount of time, she slowly opened her eyes and looked around. This was her room, But why did she suddenly return to her room? She propped herself up with her hands in a daze and sat up. She suddenly remembered something and hurriedly took the crutch from the side of the bed. But she was so anxious that she didn't hold the crutch firmly and fell to the ground. "What's the matter?" After the voice sounded, the door of the room suddenly opened. A burly man, who was completely unfamiliar to her, appeared in front of her, causing her to scream in horror. She picked up the alarm clock on the bedside table and threw it out. "Who are you? Why are you in my house?" "Miss, it's me." Songda hurriedly caught the alarm clock. "It's me. We met downstairs. Do you remember?" The woman slightly relaxed this time, and then quickly grasped the quilt. Songda slowly said, "You suddenly fainted and had a high fever, so I sent you home. I found the key in your wallet with the room number on it." "But you—" The woman looked at Songda in surprise, or at his dressing at this time. A woman's apron was hung on his burly body. Because his body was too strong, the apron looked quite small. At the same time, his head was wrapped with a white cloth. In addition, he was holding a broom. "This." Songda looked at the broom in his hand. "It's been a bit long and I'm a bit bored. It seems that your house hasn't been cleaned for a long time, so I couldn't help but do it. Don't worry, I didn't touch your clothes." "Natasha," the woman suddenly murmured in a low voice. "What?" Songda gave a start and then became silent. The woman's voice trembled. "Natasha, tell me about her news." "I'm mentally prepared. I've seen the news, and I know about the vineyard and the castle." Was she calm? No, Songda saw that the woman's hands were trembling as she gripped the blanket. He knew that she couldn't be calm right now. Songda took a deep breath, taking off his apron and headscarf, and then took off his shoes outside the door before walking into the room. "Your sister, unfortunately, died in the collapse of the castle." Songda looked at the woman. She lowered her head, and her shoulders suddenly trembled. To Songda's relief, the woman didn't look into his eyes. Songda was not used to lying. He continued, "I'm sorry, when we found your sister, her body had been smashed by the falling stones. We could only find her ID card, which was the only thing she left." The woman didn't speak, nor did she cry loudly. She just sat there with her head lowered, as if she was just an empty shell. Songda shook his head, gently putting the alarm clock back on the bedside table, and then put down Natasha's ID card. Songda quietly walked out of the room and closed the door. The moment he closed the door, he heard a scream, followed by a burst of crying. It was a sad sound of collapse. Songda frowned and then walked into the kitchen. After crying for a long time, the room became quiet. After a while, Songda came out of the kitchen with a bowl of medicine. It was some Chinese medicine he bought from the medicine store in Zhonghua Street to treat cold and fever. Songda quietly opened the door and found that Natasha's sister had fallen under the bed, unconscious again. Songda had to put her back on the bed, covered the cup, and then fed her the medicine. She should be better when she woke up tomorrow, but the heart disease couldn't be cured by medicine. Songda sighed and began to look at the things in the room. There were several photos of the woman and Natasha on the bedside table, from when they were young to a recent photo. Later, Songda found the original diary on the table. Songda hesitated and then opened it, but he could only listen and speak, and it was difficult for him to read and write. Helplessly, Songda could only take out his mobile phone and use the translation software to read the diary bit by bit. "If possible, I really hope to be on the stage again. Yin 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 yin." Chapter 921. Muscle Atrophy? Mr. Blind was in the laboratory of the pharmaceutical company's special research team. When Songda came to him, Mr. Blind was reading all kinds of data about the living zombie given by the research team. It was printed in Braille. There was a device that was specially configured for Mr. Blind. When Mr. Blind heard Songda's question, he moved his hand away from the Braille page and faced Songda. At this moment, Songda nodded and sat down. "Yes, blind man. If it were you, would you be able to cure this disease? Mr. Blind was silent for a while and said slowly, "It depends on the patient's specific condition. If it's bone atrophy because of bone necrosis, even I can't cure it. If it's because of other reasons, we need to examine it carefully. Songda, I'm not a real immortal. You should know that I can cure the disease." "I see." Songda nodded. He didn't have much hope in the beginning. He knew Mr. Blind was a capable person, but not omnipotent. "Maybe we can do some acupuncture and moxibustion to see the effect." Mr. Blind thought for a while. "Songda, is this your friend? You usually don't take the initiative to ask." "You can say that." Songda sighed slowly and didn't intend to hide. "Actually, she's a relative of the living zombie in the laboratory, her sister. I went to take a look today." Mr. Blind nodded and suddenly said, "Tomorrow, I'll go with you to take a look." Songda was surprised. "Mr. Blind, you're willing to help?" Mr. Blind said indifferently, "After all, we're studying Natasha. Taoism also talks about karma. Since Natasha has a blood relative, we'll be contaminated by her karma if we study her. We've done too many evil things. Not everyone can bear the judgment pen of Yama's palace." "Mr. Blind, I think you still have a long life ahead of you," Songda said seriously. Mr. Blind just waved his hand and dismissed him. But Songda didn't leave immediately. Instead, he said, "Mr. Blind, there's one more thing. I wanted to find you earlier, but you've been busy these days and I couldn't find a chance." "What's the matter?" Mr. Blind raised his head. Songda said, "It's like this. Blind, do you still remember the treasury under the castle? Actually, when we escaped for the first time, we found something in a treasure trove. We thought that this should be something that you would be interested in, so we hid it." "Oh." Mr. Blind revealed a curious expression. The Song brothers were martial artists. Although there was still a huge gap between them and his system, compared to ordinary people, they were already people he could talk to in the village. Occasionally, he would give the three brothers some pointers on their martial art. Naturally, Songda and his brothers also knew some of his interests and hobbies. "This is it, an ancient scripture." At this moment, Songda took out the ancient scripture scroll that he had taken from the treasury and placed it in front of Mr. Blind. Mr. Blind frowned. He suddenly extended his hand and placed his palm gently on the scripture. But in an instant, Mr. Blind's hand bounced off. It wasn't that there was something on the scripture that bounced off Mr. Blind's hand. Rather, the moment Mr. Blind touched the scripture scroll, he retracted his hand. It was like an ordinary person's natural reaction after being electrocuted. Songda saw it very clearly and asked nervously, "Blind, this thing is dangerous?" "It's hard to say." Mr. Blind shook his head and said with a serious expression, "However, you were right to bring this thing to me. Leaving it in the hands of you three brothers will only bring you some unnecessary things. I can't say for sure, but it is definitely not something good." "So dangerous?" Songda was shocked. Mr. Blind pressed his palm on the ancient scripture scroll and said, "There seems to be something on it. It seems to be some kind of special seal. However, there is one thing that I can be sure of. This thing is an item at our level." If Blind was at this level, Songda was slightly shocked. Strictly speaking, the three brothers could also be considered as transcendent. However, they had only become transcendents after a long period of bitter training. Moreover, they had always been at the bottom of the ladder among transcendents. In the past, they had discussed transcendence with Mr. Blind and learned that there were many systems among transcendents. They were incomparably huge and complicated. There was no uniform standard in the world. There was only a clear division between different regions. Take Mr. Blind for example. In the world of cultivators, he could be classified as someone who had entered the path of Tao. As for Songda and his brothers, they could only be considered as someone who had grasped the path of Tao. In the world of cultivators in China, attaining the path of Tao was the best state of cultivation. It was also the group with the strongest abilities. However, according to Mr. Blind, those who had attained the path of Tao were few and far between. "Alright, I'll leave this thing with you." Songda did not hesitate at all. "Then, Mr. Blind, if there's nothing else, I'll take my leave." Mr. Blind suddenly said, "Wait a moment." As he said that, Mr. Blind took out a pen and paper. Then, he silently wrote something on the paper. Songda did not take a look out of curiosity. Instead, he quietly waited. About 20 minutes later, Mr. Blind took out 2 pages filled with words. "This is a chi nurturing technique. It's better than the internal cultivation technique you're currently cultivating. Take it. You deserve it." Songda was immediately overjoyed. It seemed that the 3 brothers' plan in the treasure vault was correct. Mr. Blind was a fair person. He would never take advantage of others for free. Songda quickly skimmed through the contents of the 2 pages, only to feel that the contents were cryptic and hard to understand, but when he read it silently, the true power in his body had a restless feeling. Songda knew that this was definitely a good thing, and immediately kept it well and bid farewell. After Songda left, Mr. Blind did not continue to read the zombie research report. Instead, he sat up straight and placed his hands naturally on his legs. The scroll of scripture was placed flat in front of him. Mr. Blind suddenly opened his eyes. His expression was solemn. However, not long after, Mr. Blind's mouth overflowed with blood. He hurriedly closed his eyes and held his chest. He took a deep breath. After a long time, he calmed down. However, he frowned and muttered to himself, "What is this? Why can't even heaven's eye see through it?" Recently, this was the second time he could not see through it. The first time was on young Master Luochio. He could not see through young Master Luochio's fate. However, he was almost certain that young Master Luochio was a noble person. However, this ancient scripture scroll was also. Mr. Blind sat quietly for a long time. Then, he took out a wooden box from the drawer of his desk. He placed the scripture scroll into the wooden box. Then, he formed a sword seal with his fingers and wrote something on the wooden box. A faint light flashed between his fingers. After a series of complicated symbols were drawn, they merged into the wooden box. Mr. Blind let out a sigh of relief. At this time, Mr. Blind's phone rang. This was his personal phone. "Ancestor, it's me, Huang Ruanfa." A deep voice came from the other end of the phone. The owner of the voice was probably not young. "Huang Ruanfa?" Mr. Blind fell silent for a long time before saying, "What's the matter?" The reason why the person named Huang Ruanfa addressed him as ancestor was not because Huang Ruanfa was his disciple. It was because Huang Ruanfa was the descendant of a boy who had followed Mr. Blind back then. As the boy had always been loyal, Mr. Blind had passed down some fortune-telling techniques to him before he traveled the world. It was a form of compensation. A few years ago, he had returned once. The boy had already died. However, he had met Huang Ruanfa. This fellow had learned the fortune-telling techniques left behind by the boy and had earned quite a bit of wealth. However, at the same time, he had revealed a lot of heavenly secret. Mr. Blind could not be bothered with him due to the sins he had committed. However, in the end, out of consideration for the little incense he had left with the boy, Huang Ruanfa left him a contact number. For the past few years, Huang Ruanfa had not called this number. Mr. Blind had also warned Huang Ruanfa not to contact him unless it was absolutely necessary. "Ancestor, it's like this," Huang Ruanfa hurriedly said. "Actually, it has been a few months since I returned to my old residence at Wudong Mountain. However, there's a matter that I can't resolve. I have no choice but to call you." "What is it?" Mr. Blind said indifferently. Huang Ruanfa hurriedly said, "It's like this. A few months ago, I read the fortune of a young man. Originally, it was just a matter of marriage. I thought it would be very simple. However, no matter how I tried, I couldn't get any result. That young man was very strange. It was just like the appearance of all living beings mentioned in the fortune-telling technique you left behind. Later on, I wasn't strong enough and fainted. After I woke up, I was no longer able to read anything. I was directly crippled. Left with no choice, I could only return to my old residence at Wudong Mountain to find a solution. However, after such a long time, there was no progress. I really had no other choice. As such, I had no choice but to disturb your cultivation. Of course, he didn't know that Mr. Blind wasn't cultivating somewhere. Instead, he was in the research lab of a pharmaceutical company. Appearance of all living beings. Mr. Blind muttered to himself for a moment before slowly saying, I understand your situation. However, your crippled cultivation might not necessarily be the result of this divination. Huang Ruanfa, ever since you learned the art of fortune-telling, you have revealed too many heavenly secrets. This is the punishment that the heavens have given you. Ah, how could this be? Huang Ruanfa said in frustration, but I have been keeping a low profile for the past few years. I even paid attention to cultivating my mind and accumulating good karma. In the end, I still can't escape? Ancestor, you have to save me. In the past month, I've often been seized by a sudden impulse and felt uneasy. It's as if a great disaster is about to befall me. I'm really distressed. I beg of you. How about this? Mr. Blind thought for a moment. Whatever benefits you have gained from this divination technique, you can disperse them all. Accumulating good karma isn't useless. Great karma can even wash away your sins. That's all I have to say. What do you want to do? Figure it out yourself. This. At this time, Huang Ruanfa was restless in his former residence on Mount Wudong. However, this ancestor was a godlike figure, and there was no use in forcing him. He could only helplessly agree. Ruanfa will do according to your teachings. Fate has its own way. Go. Mr. Blind nodded. There's one more thing, ancestor. Huang Ruanfa hurriedly said, Yesterday, someone left a note on the meditation mat in the old residence. Ruanfa doesn't know who did it either. What was written on the note? Mr. Blind frowned. Nothing. Huang Ruanfa said bluntly, only 6 words were written. 2nd of February, dragon raises its head. Ancestor? Are you still there? I understand. After a moment of silence, Mr. Blind suddenly said, Huang Ruanfa, you should stay in the old residence for the next few days. I'll go back in a few days. That's all. Without waiting for Huang Ruanfa to respond, Mr. Blind turned off the phone and quickly walked out of the office. Prepare the car. I'm going back to my humble abode. He didn't know how the death of a natural person was defined in this country. On the 7th day after the accident, the insurance company directly went to Ouyang. After a period of observation and the fact that Ouyang had an American passport, Ouyang was finally allowed to leave the hospital on the 7th day. Zhong Luoyue didn't come to pick her up because she had already left. It seemed that some people from the Zhong family came to pick her up. Such a powerful family in China naturally wouldn't allow their direct descendant to stay in such a dangerous place. However, after this incident, Ouyang thoughts about Zhong Luoyue faded a lot. Children from powerful families were ruthless. Mr. Ouyang, the local government has issued the death certificate of Mr. Jin Wu City. The insurance agent who came to the hospital early was very polite at this time. Although we are very sad about this matter, since there is a death certificate, we think Mr. Ouyang should open the things left by Mr. Jin. If possible, Ouyang didn't want the inheritance in the bank safe. But what did Mr. Jin leave him? Sir? Mr. Ouyang, are you okay? You don't look too good. Oh, it's nothing. I just feel that the sun is too bright. Ouyang shook his head. Maybe I stayed in the hospital for a long time, so I can't adapt to the sun all of a sudden. Ouyang said. Then, he looked at the car that the insurance officer drove over. He had a feeling of wanting to go in immediately. The weather was not hot, but he had an inexplicable feeling of discomfort. He just wanted to find a cooler place. Then get in the car. We'll go to the bank right away. The insurance agent smiled at this time. Mr. Ouyang Jie, do you have all your documents? Let's go. Ouyang Jie directly got into the back seat of the car and finally felt more comfortable. Yin 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 yin. Chapter 922. After going through the procedures, Ouyang Jie took out Uncle Jin's belongings from the bank's safe, but he didn't open it immediately. Before leaving, Zhong Luoyue booked a good local hotel suite for Ouyang Jie. Although this approach was meaningless for Ouyang Jie, it was better than nothing. In addition, although the hotel was good, it was naturally not as good as the hotel under the Song dynasty. However, considering the relationship between Song Ying and Zhong Luoyue, Ouyang Jie had nothing to say. It was called a rest. This was a resort-style hotel near the seaside. At this time, Ouyang Jie pulled all the curtains in the room and opened the thing left by Uncle Jin in the bank's safe, a box. But there was no key. This was a password lockbox. Looking at the series of numbers on the lock, Ouyang Jie couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. This box seemed to be specially made, and it seemed that it was not easy to open by force. He was afraid that, if it was really opened by force, the things in the box would be damaged. Ouyang Jie subconsciously bit his finger. This was left by Uncle Jin, but Uncle Jin had never told him anything about the password. That was to say, this password was very likely to be known by Ouyang Jie himself, or Ouyang Jie had a relationship with Uncle Jin. Ouyang Jie quickly entered a group of numbers. This was the date after he came out of the orphanage and was saved by Uncle Jin, and the number of the date was exactly the same as the number needed for the password lock. Yes. As the password lock opened, Ouyang Jie subconsciously clenched his fist. At this time, he sighed and began to carefully open the box. There were not many things inside, only a few items. A CD, a recording pen, a sealed test tube about 20 centimeters long, and a jade lock with the word Ouyang engraved on it. In addition, at the bottom of the box there were several documents. Ouyang Jie looked at them, and it turned out to be all the property certificates and real estate information of Uncle Jin, as well as the contract to transfer all the property under his name to Ouyang Jie. His master was the legendary god of gamblers, Tushani, so Ouyang Jie's mental arithmetic was naturally very good. After a rough calculation, he found that the legacy left by Uncle Jin was unexpectedly large. In these transfer documents, Ouyang Jie also found a birth certificate. There was no father's name, but the word Ouyang was written on the mother's name. This birth certificate was written in Chinese. Ouyang Jie rubbed his eyebrows and subconsciously picked up the jade lock in the box. The word Ouyang was engraved on it, and it seemed to be related to his life. However, Ouyang Jie remembered that since he could remember, he had never seen such a thing, but this was left to him by Uncle Jin. Then where did Uncle Jin get this jade lock? Ouyang Jie took a deep breath, picked up the recording pen, and pressed the play button. Uncle Jin, what are you hiding from me? It was Uncle Jin's voice. Ajay, when you hear this recording, it means that I have an accident. Then, I will mainly tell you a few things here, and you can think about what to do next. Ouyang Jie put the recording pen on the table and sat up straight. First of all, the first thing. Ajay, there is no doubt that you are my son. You were placed in the orphanage by me, but later you escaped from the orphanage. I had no choice but to take you to my side. The reason why Tushani accepted you as a disciple was because I asked him. Ouyang Jie's mind was blank at this time. He subconsciously pressed the pause button because he needed some time to digest what Uncle Jin said. Father. Uncle Jin is my biological father? So my father has been by my side all these years? The urge to know more made Ouyang Jie press the play button again. I don't intend to ask you to forgive me. I'm just telling you the past. When I was a gambling demon in Jinwu City, I was ruthless and had many enemies. Your birth was an accident. I didn't want your existence to be a burden to me, so I abandoned you. Ouyang is your mother's surname, and the jade lock in the box is what your mother left you. As for your mother, to be honest, I don't know where she came from. It has only been a few days since your mother and I met and parted ways, but a year later, someone sent you to me. I said, there is no doubt that you are my child. This is something I did a paternity test. I'm sorry to break your fantasy about your biological parent. Hearing this, Ouyang Jie couldn't help but smile bitterly. He didn't resent Uncle Jean, but he couldn't accept this fact for a while. Ouyang Jie himself also entered the gambling world, so he naturally knew how much danger accompanied this industry. He himself was a person who didn't dare to abandon his lover. I'll stop here about your life. The next thing I want to say is the reason why I have been with Tushini for more than 10 years. Tushini, the gambling god we often call, the guy who took away a finger, is different from us. He is not a human, but a demon who can suck blood. He is the legendary vampire. Ouyang Jie's hand trembled. He was afraid that he heard it wrong, so he quickly rewound the recording and listened to it again. He is not a human, but a demon who can suck blood. He is the legendary vampire. Again and again. He is not a human, but a demon who can suck blood. He is the legendary vampire. Again. He is not a human, but a demon who can suck blood. He is the legendary vampire. In the end, Ouyang Jie did not rewind the video because he remembered the incident at the hospital. The lockdown by the local government and the army, the people who died in the hospital were all disposed of overnight, and Zhongluyue's taboo when talking about this incident made Ouyang Jie understand that what he encountered in the hospital were real zombies, not the so-called zombie bath salts poison people. With zombies, such unnatural creatures, then vampires and the like would become a possibility as well. Is that so? Ouyang Jie picked up the test tube in the box. This is the blood I extracted from Tushini during that time. In fact, I extracted a lot of his blood for research, but so far, I have been unable to analyze the blood composition of vampires. If you are interested, you can go and find out by yourself. I have placed the research lab in Los Angeles, and it is also one of the properties I left for you. After that, there was a lot of information about Uncle Kim's research on vampires over the years, such as the weaknesses of vampires that he found out, the feeding patterns of vampires, and many more. But these were not what Ouyang Jie wanted to hear the most. What he wanted to hear was skimmed by Uncle Kim's words at the beginning of this recording. What a heartless man. However, over the years, he and Uncle Kim had spent in the Vineyard Castle, and at this time, Ouyang Jie's eyes gradually had some tears. After a long time, Ouyang Jie calmed down a little, and he suddenly thought of a problem. He remembered that he was indeed bitten by a zombie. However, when he went to the hospital for a checkup, there was no abnormality. No matter what kind of checkup, he passed safely. Otherwise, even with the pressure from the U.S. Embassy, it was impossible for him to be released so easily. Why is there nothing wrong with me? He was puzzled, and for the time being, he could only hide this question in the bottom of his heart. Later, Ouyang Jie spent a lot of time calming himself down. After that, he used the hotel's equipment to open the last thing in the box that he had not studied, the CD. However, when Ouyang Jie saw the content of the CD, his originally calm mood was instantly broken. He was shocked, frightened, and even felt cold, looking at the video content of the CD frame by frame. This was actually a cruel video of a vampire hunting human. In the video, there was an old woman who became gorgeous after sucking blood. She was actually someone Ouyang Jie knew, a friend of his master Tushini, Lady Eve, who would vacation in the castle every year. There was also a leech-like monster, from a human's appearance to a monster's appearance, and then back to a human's appearance. At this moment, Ouyang Jie only felt that life was like a nightmare, and all the bad things were coming one after another. On this day, Ouyang Jie did not leave the hotel room at all. The scenery on the highway was flying past. This was Song Ying's favorite car, a supercar that would definitely cause eyeballs to explode on the road. At this time, there were only 2 people in the car, Song Ying and Luoqiu. It was now early in the morning. Luoqiu was dragged out of the room by Song Ying, the reason being that she wanted to find someone to drive on the road. Because of the importance of punctuality and the importance of sleep time, Luoqiu at first recommended Song Haoran, who seemed to like nightlife. But Song Ying said that she could not find Song Haoran, and did not know where he went. So Luoqiu continued to recommend others. In the end, he was chosen by Song Ying. Later, Luoqiu understood one thing, that was, his strategy of refusing at the beginning was wrong. He should have agreed at the beginning, then Song Ying would have chosen to stand him up because she agreed too quickly. You don't want it, I just want it, and so on. Missing, you are speeding, this is very dangerous, please reduce your speed. Although only Song Ying and Luoqiu were in the car, there was more than one supercar on the road. There was a white Alfa Romeo closely behind, the driver was Gan Hong. This is not my fastest speed, you can keep up with me first. Song Ying turned off the car's communication device without saying anything, and at the same time, stepped on the accelerator fiercely again. A stronger feeling of pushing came suddenly. Luoqiu seemed to be born with no way to deal with a woman who liked to race. He calmed down and asked, "You seem to have something on your mind? When will you leave?" Song Ying did not answer, but instead, she stared at Luoqiu and said seriously, "Last time you told me that you would not stay in the Song family for too long. But do you know, even if you leave now, my grandfather will not let you go. He is so good to you, beyond my imagination." "So, do you want me to go?" Luoqiu asked softly. Song Ying stepped on the brake hard at this moment, and the 2 bodies suddenly leaned forward due to inertia. When the entire supercar came to a sudden stop, there were several deep tire marks on the road, including Gan Hong's Alfa Romeo. "No, I want you to not leave." After stopping the car, Song Ying tilted her head, and her long pink hair covered her left cheek, looking very serious. "Why?" Luoqiu said indifferently, "Missing doesn't seem to like me very much. If I leave, won't it be a good thing for you?" Song Ying stared at Luoqiu without blinking and said seriously, "I am me, grandfather is grandfather. Even if I don't like it, as long as grandfather wants it, I will try my best to do it. You know, I have never seen grandfather like tonight, accommodating someone like this. You are the first." Luoqiu thought about it for a moment and felt that it was probably because of what Mr. Blind had said back in the morning hall. However, for Song Ying, it seemed to have changed. He shook his head and said, "Master Song's fondness for you is from the bottom of his heart. Missing, there is no need for you to do this." Song Ying suddenly said, "I remember telling you that my parents died in a car accident, right? However, the car accident was premeditated. The mastermind behind it was someone from the village. In the past, when we received a mission, we messed up the royal family of a small country." Song Ying sighed and leaned against the back of the driver's seat, both hands gripping the steering wheel. She seemed to be trying to hold onto something. It was clear that she was exerting her strength. "That was the first and only time I saw my grandfather cry," Song Ying recalled. "I was lying on the bed alone. The doctor said that it was due to the concussion from the car accident. Actually, I had woken up long ago, but I didn't dare to open my eyes. Later, I opened my eyes and saw my grandfather. He was sitting beside me, covering his eyes with his hands. Do you know? No matter if it was me or anyone else in the village, it was hard to imagine that Song Tianyu was such a helpless person at that moment." She turned her head with a bleak smile on her face. "You probably think it's ridiculous, right? A family that rose from war and killed people all day long will naturally be killed one day. Actually, I had forgotten about my parents long ago and didn't hate anyone. However, since the day I saw my grandfather crying in front of me, I secretly told myself that I must bring the Song family out of this hopeless situation. What's wrong with rising from war? I can invest. I can learn how to invest. I can transfer all the wealth of the Song family from the dark to the light. I can wash the Song family clean. One day, I want the Song family to be a white one, not a black one. One day, I want my grandfather to never have to worry about his family members dying in vengeance. One day, I will let him enjoy his old age in peace. One day, there will be such a day. Luoqiu listened quietly. At this time, Song Ying was the most beautiful, just like that day in the hotel of Song Dynasty when she warned Luoqiu after dealing with a person who cheated in the casino. That kind of stubbornness, the feeling of protecting her family at all costs. You know what? Later, when I heard from fifth uncle that Grandpa secretly cried the night he saw you, and then slept very soundly afterward, I was more jealous than ever, but he was also happier than ever before. Song Ying suddenly grabbed Luoqiu's hand and said seriously, "So, I hope you can promise me, if it's not necessary, please don't leave. Stay in the Song family, stay by my grandfather's side." Luoqiu slowly broke away from Song Ying's hand and shook his head. "Miss Ying, it's good to protect your family's feelings. However, if one were to force others to do something because of this, how should one judge them? There are so many people in the world. If they don't live for themselves, they live for others." Song Ying gave the answer with incomparable firmness, "I don't care so much. I can't stay in the Song family for a long time." Luoqiu finally shook his head, but, before he finished, Luoqiu frowned. On the road, several black sedans quickly rushed over at this time. More than a dozen big men with guns in their hands walked out fiercely. They actually surrounded the two supercars that were temporarily parked on the side of the road. Yen. Chapter 9:23. The dozen strong men in front of her had different skin colors, so she couldn't tell which side they belonged to. However, there was one thing that was certain, and that was that this group of burly men did not come with good intentions. At this time, the windows of the two supercars were being knocked by this group of big men with iron rods. They signaled the three people in the two supercars to walk out by themselves. Of course, it was not so easy for them to break the windows of the supercars. Maybe they felt it was a sin to treat these supercars like this. But the threat was getting stronger. "Gan Hong, do you know which side they are from?" Song Ying didn't panic at this time. As the business agent of the Song family and the princess of the Song dynasty, Song Ying had seen a lot of people who were fiercer than these people. No one in the Song family was timid, even though the Song family was small. "I don't know." Gan Hong quickly contacted Song Ying through the communication device in the car. "They shouldn't be from the local area. No one here dares to hurt you. Please hold on for a while. The guards should be here soon." They were always able to catch up with Miss Song Ying, who was speeding on the road. In the village where the Song family used for training, there was a saying that being able to fight was not a skill, but having superb driving skills. Being able to catch up with a supercar running like a wild horse on a complicated road situation was considered a skill. Only then could one be qualified to be a guard in my humble house. This time, Gan Hong was careless. Song Ying drove out with at least 3 cars and a team of 9 guards. But Gan Hong knew Song Ying's preference and thought she was in a bad mood, so she deliberately let the guards slow down. But unexpectedly, there was actually someone who dared to provoke the Tai Sui. "Come out, little girl. Come out." On the winding mountain road, this group of people who suddenly intercepted had gradually become impatient. They smashed the 2 supercars more and more fiercely. "Are you waiting for someone to rescue you?" "Unfortunately, you can't wait. This should be the leader of these guys." He was a man in his 30s with medium long hair. His skin was yellow and he spoke the local language, not very fluent. Song Ying frowned. But at this time, several loud sounds suddenly came from below the winding mountain road. It seemed to be the sound of an explosion. From afar, one could see a string of flames coming from the winding road below. "It's the escort's car. Did these guys plan this?" Song Ying's expression changed slightly because she realized that these people were not the kind of people who did not know the situation and blocked the road to rob them. Instead, they were organized and premeditated to plan this interception. They knew who he was, and they even knew the power of the Song family here, but they still had the guts to come out and intercept him. There was someone behind this, and the person behind this might not be afraid of the Song family's direct revenge. An enemy or an opponent. You're not coming out? At this time, the middle-haired man in the crowd sneered. He took a wooden stick and wrapped it with a rag. Then, he poured gasoline on it and made a torch on the spot. Another person began to pour gasoline on the two supercars. Let's see if you'll come out or not. Middle long hair sneered. At this time, Luoqiu frowned slightly. His thumb and middle finger gently stuck together. He used his ability without any conditions. Snapping his fingers was just a personal habit, like a kind of self-suggestion. Sit tight. At this time, Song Ying anxiously said, "What kind of international joke is this? Just this little hooligan who came out of nowhere wants to catch me? Hundreds of years too early." At this moment, Song Ying directly started the engine of the supercar. Luoqiu blinked. He seemed to have guessed what Song Ying was going to do. She shifted into the back gear and stepped on the accelerator with all her might. There was a loud bang, followed by a solid impact. Song Ying had actually driven this expensive supercar and forcefully knocked away the cars that these burly men had driven over to intercept them. Bang! Back gear, bang! First gear, step on the throttle, bang! I'm so annoyed! At this time, Song Ying's fingers flicked quickly on the gear change. She didn't hurry to complain. Working overtime every day, I'm so annoyed. It's not easy to come out for a race. I'm so annoyed. Go to hell, you little bastards. Hennessy's Viper was riddled with scars at this moment, but its results were remarkable. Under Song Ying's madness, it forcibly pushed away several vehicles that were blocking it. When there was enough space for it to escape, it was like a rocket. Under the terrifying power of only 4 seconds of 100 km/h acceleration, this Hennessy Viper had already run far away. At this time, this group of men stared blankly at the Hennessy Viper that had already rushed out of the blockade. Suddenly they quivered. The leader, with medium long hair, shouted angrily, "What are you doing? Chase!" But before they could react, they heard a loud braking sound in front of them. The Hennessy Viper actually skidded on the road and turned around. The headlights shone, the roaring sound of the engine and the sound of the exhaust pipe instantly resounded in the surroundings. At this time, Song Ying licked her lips. There was a crazy expression on her face, almost roaring. Since elementary school, I've never been scared of a bumper car. Come, let's hurt each other. Boom! At this time, the Hennessy Viper crazily ran out at this time, and actually crashed into the 3 cars and the dozen men again. Seeing that Song Ying not only did not have the intention to step on the brakes, but also crazily accelerated, Luoqiu's fingers suddenly relaxed. I feel that Song Ying's character setting seems to have collapsed somewhere, hey? Fuck. Seeing this, the man with medium long hair did not care about whether it would hurt or not. He picked up the pistol and shot directly like this. Bang bang bang. The bullets hit the windshield of the Hennessy Viper, creating cracks, but Song Ying laughed happily at this time. This woman is crazy. Run. Bang. A man could not dodge in time and was brushed by the Viper's body. He immediately flew out on the road, rolled a few meters, and fell to the ground screaming. Song Ying obviously did not intend to stop like this. The steering wheel and paddles were operated very quickly. She actually really treated this Hennessy Viper as a bumper car. Seeing this scene, Gan Hong helplessly sighed, and then took out the pistol and magazine from the storage box. The Alfa Romeo's door opened, and Gan Hong directly rolled out. Then she half knelt and quickly shot. Gan Hong's bullets were much more efficient than Song Ying's reckless attack. These people were originally scared out of their wits by Song Ying's reckless driving. At this time, they were already in a panic, and Gan Hong easily reaped a wave of damage. Damn it! Seeing that more than 10 people were taken care of by the 2 women, middle-aged long-haired became ruthless. He lit up his lighter and looked at the gasoline barrel on the ground. He clenched his teeth and planned to ignite it. You better not do this. But at this moment, medium long-hair heard Gan Hongbing's cold warning, and also felt the hard object at the back of his head. Without a doubt, this was the muzzle of a pistol. Don't. At this time, medium long-hair directly threw the lighter on the ground, and raised his hands, indicating that he surrendered. Gan Hong coldly snorted, and the corner of her foot kicked the medium long-hair's knee, kicking him to the ground. At the same time, she grabbed his shoulder and instantly subdued him. Bang dash! The Hennessy Viper finally hit the front of the black car, and the front of the supercar was completely changed. Song Ying was gasping for breath, and her hands were still holding the steering wheel. She turned her head, and while gasping, looked at Luochio, who was silently staring at her, and snorted, "What? Haven't you seen a woman drive before? What a pity! This supercar seemed to have only been driven once." Luochio glanced at the scene of the accident and suddenly said softly, "Next time if you want to drive a bumper car, go to the amusement park. It's none of your business." Song Ying coldly snorted and kicked open the door, walking out. A pistol fell on the ground after being hit. Song Ying casually picked it up and then loaded it. She directly walked to the medium long hair, and inserted the muzzle into his mouth. "Who asked you to come here? You've got guts." The menacing middle long hair was not as unyielding as he had imagined, but the moment the hard spearhead struck his teeth, the man's entire body began to tremble. I'll talk, don't kill me. Don't kill me." The medium long hair directly begged. Song Ying glanced at Gan Hong indifferently. Gan Hong nodded and dislocated the joints of the middle-aged long-haired's hands without saying a word. The middle-aged long-haired couldn't help but let out another blood-curdling scream. Luochio looked at Song Ying and Gan Hong with interest. It was just a glance, and it seemed that the two had a good tacit understanding. At this time, through the interrogation of the medium long hair, the result was that someone gave them a sum of money to intercept and kidnap Song Ying on the road. Therefore, the weapons and the bombs placed on the road to blow up the bodyguard's convoy were also provided by the buyer behind the scenes. In fact, they had been lying in ambush nearby for a short period of time, with the purpose of waiting for a Hennessy Viper to appear. However, they didn't know the identity of the buyer behind the scenes, and they didn't ask much. They only knew that after completing this kidnapping, they could get a large sum of money. In addition, just as Gan Hong had expected, this gang was not locals, but a criminal gang that came all the way from other places. Suddenly, Gan Hong's phone rang. After she answered, she quickly looked at Song Ying and said, "Miss Ying, what happened to the bodyguards?" "They successfully jumped out of the car, but they were unlucky and suffered some injuries. It's basically nothing serious. It was a false alarm." "I know who did it." Song Ying snorted at this time and said with great dissatisfaction, "It must be that damn woman. She wants to use the same way to retaliate." "The third miss of the Zhong family?" Gan Hong frowned, but according to the information, some people from the Zhong family came and were taken away by Zhong Luoyue 2 days ago. "Is this possible?" Song Ying snorted at this time. "Whether it is or not, won't we know if we ask?" asked. Luochio was stunned. At this time, Song Ying directly picked up the phone. After a few beeps, the phone was connected. Song Ying said at this time, "Hypocrite, please find someone professional when you find someone to mess with me next time. I know it's you. Don't let me see you again next time. Bitch." Looking at Song Ying's angry expression, Luochio was not surprised that the person behind the highway interception was Zhong Luoyue. What was strange was that Song Ying and Zhong Luoyue had such a relationship. She could just call and ask directly? Although he didn't know what Zhong Luoyue said to Song Ying, Looking at Song Ying's deflated appearance at this time, it wasn't something easy to talk about. Well, the children of aristocratic families, in fact, there were a lot of sadness that they couldn't tell outsiders, right? Luoqiu shook his head. This was just a false alarm. To be more accurate, it was just a mutual grudge between two very rich women with superpowers. But then again, how should we go back? Gan Hong was the first to ask this question. Because it was just something she had to consider. The bodyguards team had been blown up, and Song Ying's own Hennessy Viper was completely destroyed by her bumper car driving skills. At present, the only thing that could be driven normally was the Alfa Romeo. But this was a supercar model with only 2 seats, and there was no consideration for a storage rear seat. 2 seats, how should 3 people sit? Or wait here for the Song family to send someone to pick them up? Absolutely can't let the family know about this matter. Song Ying suddenly became a little anxious at this time. Luoqiu looked over doubtfully, only to see Song Ying stuttering at this time. Grandfather, he doesn't know what method I used to intercept Zhong Luoyue. There are some unwritten rules between aristocratic families. In short, this matter absolutely can't be leaked out. Then I'll drive. Missing, you and Master Chiu squeezed together. Gan Hong thought for a while and said. Song Ying screamed at this time. Absolutely not. Who wants to squeeze together with this facial paralysis? Gan Hong could only helplessly say, then Missing, you drive. I'll squeeze with the young master. Isn't this letting him off easy? Song Ying hummed and disagreed. Gan Hong would never leave Luoqiu half a step, so these 2 people were tied together. If Song Ying drove away by herself, she wouldn't feel at ease leaving Luoqiu and Gan Hong on this mountain road. But if these 2 people drove away and left her alone, although there were guards who escaped from the car accident behind them, Song Ying still felt abandoned. We can't walk back like this, right? Missing. Gan Hong shook her head. I guess we can't call a taxi at this time. By the way, Missing, you'd better issue a gag order to these guards. Song Ying said calmly. You don't have to worry about this. Their report will definitely go through 5th Uncle first. He will help me hide it from Grandpa. But I must appear in front of 5th Uncle as soon as possible. So why are you so skilled? It seems that Master Song is not easy. Actually, I can drive. Luoqiu proposed a compromise. Oh, although the Hennessy Viper is a pity, the Alfa Romeo seems to be good. This is the 2nd time Luoqiu drove a supercar. So, in the narrow passenger seat, Gan Hong and Song Ying were stacked together like this. Luoqiu drove slowly. Chapter 9:24. Bang, rumble, bang. The Alfa Romeo's body rolled all the way down the cliff. When it finally fell to the bottom of the cliff, it completely crashed into a pile of scrap iron. Then a thick black smoke rose from the bottom of the cliff. In a small watchtower on the nearby mountain road, a man was turning the night vision goggles in his hand at the moment. The light green lens could still see the burning flames under the cliff. The man looked like this for a while and finally nodded. He put down the night vision goggles and then took out his mobile phone. Boss, it's done. The car has been blown up. While the man said, he suddenly pressed a button, only to hear another loud noise from the distance. This time, it was the Hennessy Viper that had been destroyed by Song Ying's driving skills. The man grinned at this time, because this was a very cool feeling, blowing up a supercar in an instant. Explosion was romantic. This sentence was not wrong at all. Did you leave any traces? The voice on the other side of the phone asked a little anxiously at this time. Boss, I think the goddess of luck must be favoring you. The man smiled at this time and said, because just before I took action, I don't know where a group of little bastards came from, driving a few cars to intercept Song Ying. The man briefly described what he had seen from afar. That's it. Although we don't know where this group of people came from, since they appeared at this time, it's equivalent to giving us a new layer of cover. In this case, we need to do a lot less, or maybe we don't even need to do anything at all. because the direction of Song family's investigation is likely to start from this group of little bastards. Well, come back first. At the other side of the phone, the man at this time said in a deep voice, "Be careful, don't let people find out, there are a lot of Song family's hidden sentries nearby." Got it. The man smiled, then turned off the phone and began to tidy up the things here. Some food and water, because he had been waiting in this place for a long time, and some surveillance tools. After packing up all these things, the man stretched his body. After this assassination, he thought that he should change his identity again. He was used to changing his identity every time he finished a job. For him, a different identity could bring him a different life. After a period of work ended, it was the beginning of a new life. The end of a new life was the arrival of a new job. It was like reincarnation. Are you going to Iceland this time? He thought so because he had no intention of obediently returning to the boss's side. Instead, he planned to leave immediately after receiving the balance. The target of the assassination this time was a little scary. If they were too late, they might not be able to escape the responsibility. Iceland. His heart suddenly longed for that tranquil land. He picked up the bag and was about to turn around and leave the small watchtower, but the moment he turned around, the man was shocked, because behind him, a young man suddenly appeared out of nowhere. The young man who suddenly appeared was currently sizing up the surroundings of the watchtower. Is this the detonator of the bomb? The 2 sports cars were destroyed. The young man suddenly asked. At the same time, he looked at the man's left hand. The man was stunned. Only then did he remember that the detonator was still in his hand. The man looked at the young man expressionlessly. He slowly moved his feet and suddenly said, "What detonator? There's no such thing." As he said, he threw the thing in his hand on the ground and directly stepped on it, breaking the detonator into pieces. The moment the detonator was broken, the gunman hurriedly threw the bag in his hand to the young man. Moreover, the moment the black bag was thrown out, the man made a gesture of pulling out a gun. He pulled out a silver pistol from the gun bag hanging behind his waist. The man pressed his left hand on his right wrist, and the silver pistol shot out several bullets at this time. He was famous for being a fast shooter, and at such a close distance, he could hit the target even with his eyes closed. After 3 consecutive shots, the man suddenly stopped, because he saw an incredible scene. The bullets, at such a short distance, the bullets actually stopped in the air at this moment. The bullets he just shot out suddenly became slow as if they were shot into a gel. The bullets were still moving forward, but the speed was very slow. In the end, the 3 bullets stopped in front of the young man. The 3 bullets slowed down and stopped in front of the young man. It was actually a visible process. Bang, bang, bang. The gunman screamed at this time, and shot at the young man again with the silver pistol in his hand, until all the bullets in the magazine were used up. There were a total of 6 shots, but these 6 bullets were all stopped in front of the young man's heart, like a special effect in a movie. What are you? The gunman's voice couldn't help trembling at this time, and there was an inexplicable fear in his voice. What kind of monster was this guy that couldn't be hurt by bullets? Do you know that throwing things is a very bad habit? The young man shook his head at this time, and picked up the bag that was thrown out by the gunman at the beginning. He picked up the bag, patted the dust on it, and then put it on a wooden table in the lookout. The gunman didn't dare to move at this time. And these 2. The young man looked at the bullets that stopped in the air at this time. He suddenly stretched out his hand, and took out the bullets that stopped in the air one by one. Then he took them out from the air, and then put them on the wooden table one by one. The bullets were erected and lined up in a row. The young man said, "This is much neater." After the young man took out the first bullet from the air, the gunman couldn't help sweating, his throat shaking, and his heart beating violently. When the young man put the last bullet on the wooden table and looked at him, the gunman didn't say anything, but just raised his hands up. "Don't. I'll cooperate. You can do whatever you want." Even if he changed another magazine and fired another 6 bullets, the result would be the same. In the end, there would only be another row of bullets on the wooden table. The gunman had done many tasks and seen many strange things, but what happened in front of him now was not enough to be described as strange. At this time, the gunman somewhat hated his calm personality. Why did he have to be so calm? Now, just standing in front of this horrible young man made his scalp numb and his body weak, but he still had to think of a way to deal with it. I actually like to solve problems without violence. The young man nodded. Come, sit, let's talk. The young man pointed at a bench next to the wooden table. Wooden tables and benches were almost all the furnishings in this watchtower. Seeing the young man take the initiative to sit down, the gunman plucked up his courage and slowly sat down opposite the young man. Because he was close to the window sill, the gunman was finally able to see the young man's appearance with the help of the faint light coming in from outside. He couldn't help but be shocked, because he recognized who this young man was. Wasn't this the guy who came racing with Song Ying not long ago? In the end, he was the one who drove the Alfa Romeo. But didn't the Alfa Romeo get blown up and fall directly into the cliff? How did he get here in the blink of an eye from such a faraway place? And how did he appear behind her without a sound? The gunman swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Outside the watchtower, he used the pieces of wood and bamboo he picked up to make a simple alarm, but it didn't seem to have gone off. The young man, Luoqiu, picked up one of the bullets and fiddled with it. Because it had just been fired, it didn't stay in the air for too long, so the bullet itself was still hot. The bomb exploded at the bottom of the car. Luoqiu said indifferently, "This car drove directly out of Song family's house without stopping, so it's almost impossible to install it halfway. Unless someone can hide it from me. But I don't think it's possible, that is to say, this thing was installed on the base of the 2 supercars early on." The gunman looked around nervously. At the same time, he had a feeling of hopelessness. Luoqiu said again, "Then there's only one possibility. The bomb was installed before departure. I'm very curious. What method did you use to install these bombs under the watchful eyes of so many guards in my humble abode? And I think it's not just these 2 cars, right? All of Song Ying's sports cars were installed, right? Because I'm not sure which one she will drive. In this case, it can explain why the 2 sports cars were installed with bombs. This should be the reason, am I right?" No. The gunman was still very nervous. Luoqiu nodded and muttered as if he was talking to himself. Who could it be? Was there a spy in my humble abode? Or someone who was bribed? I don't know who he is. The gunman said quickly, "We only contact each other through the internet and phone. As you see, I'm actually a gunman who gets paid to do things." Luoqiu looked at the gunman's eyes expressionlessly. Such indifferent eyes scared the gunman, and he quickly lowered his head, not daring to look at him. "Well, you're not lying," Luoqiu nodded. "I believe you don't know who is behind this." The gunman was about to say the word "thank you," but he quickly swallowed it back, because he finally realized how spineless his cooperation was, and at the same time violated the rules of his profession. The reason why so many people hired gunmen was not only because the gunman himself was very powerful, but also because the gunman would not easily give any information about his employer. This kind of gunman who betrayed his employer would not be able to survive in this profession in the future. But he said he would cooperate, so he said, succumbing to the inhuman power. "I've told you everything I know." The gunman said nervously, "Can you let me go?" What **T principle was not as important as one's own life. Principle, only when one's life was at stake, he had enough confidence to say it out. Luoqiu shook his head, saying indifferently, "I said, let's sit down and talk. Actually, I didn't ask you any questions." Recalling the terrifying young man's words, the gunman was shocked. He really didn't ask any questions. Those were just words he casually said when he was thinking. Anyway, he couldn't care so much anymore. The gunman suddenly stood up. He didn't even want to stay in this place a moment longer, in front of this young man. Every minute and every second, he felt like there were countless poisonous snakes staring at him from behind. That kind of creepy feeling, he didn't want to experience it a second time in this life. I have an appointment with my employer after the matter is done. This is the address. The gunman quickly took out a piece of paper and threw it on the table. He saw the young man pick up the paper and carefully read it, then he carefully stepped back step by step. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. When he stepped back 3 steps, he felt that he had reached a safe distance, so he instantly turned around and ran toward the exit of the watchtower. Lucio just glanced at him indifferently, as if he had no intention of chasing. He just took out his mobile phone and entered the name of the address on the map. At this time, the gunman ran out in a panic, which made him remember some horrible things that happened many years ago. His fear of this young man seemed to have a chain reaction, evoking some unpleasant childhood memories in his heart. He panted heavily, he didn't know where to go. He just wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. He even thought of not collecting the rest of the payment. Go to Iceland. That's right, he was going to Iceland. He wanted to start a new life there and forget about this unpleasant experience. Very good. That guy didn't chase after him. At this time, the gunman opened his mouth, revealing a trace of joy under the fear. But, suddenly, his feet tripped over something. In the darkness, it seemed that something was entangling his feet. What followed was a series of knocking sounds from all directions. In the middle of the mountain road at night, it was as if there were countless evil spirits laughing at him. He screamed in horror, his body suddenly lost balance, and then his whole body slid down the hillside. He finally stopped rolling. His body was full of abrasions and scars. He had rolled onto the road of the winding mountain road. However, at this moment, suddenly 2 strong lights came from behind, and there was a long horn sound. The gunman was startled, subconsciously looking at his own body. Those things that were entangling him were just some vines, and there were many wooden boards and bamboo pieces hanging on the vines. This was the primitive alarm that he made himself. Beep! The long horn sound. Bang! At this time, a figure was hit by the car that couldn't stop, directly falling into the cliff. Looking down from the window of the watchtower, Lucio shook his head. In fact, he didn't do anything. It was just that the gunman suddenly got scared and ran out. Then he suddenly slipped and was knocked down the cliff by the car. Everything was so sudden. At this time, Lucio looked at his palm. Suddenly he was a bit scared. So many sudden things seemed to come from his subconscious thoughts, affecting the surroundings in a small range, making everything change according to his thoughts. Maybe, even fate would become obedient to him. He could clearly feel this since the appearance of Black Lucio and the dispersal of him. Chapter 9:25. Now that he had found the address, Lucio did not immediately move according to the map. There were still some things that needed to be taken care of. After Alfa Romeo was blown up and the car overturned and fell down the cliff, Song Ying and Gan Hong were knocked unconscious, with Lucio beside them. The 2 of them were safe. They were placed at the bottom of the cliff, not far from the place where the sports car was blown up. Lucio found a small refrigerator in the wreckage of the sports car, and took out a bottle of water. He helped Gan Hong and Song Ying wipe their faces and sat down to think about something. He looked at Song Ying and Gan Hong, who were unconscious but leaning on each other. Even so, they were still holding each other's hands. The moment they fell down the cliff, the first thing Song Ying thought of was Gan Hong. She used her body to hug Gan Hong, while Gan Hong protected Song Ying's head. At that moment they did not consider the existence of Lucio in the car. Lucio suddenly stood up and smiled. He reached out with his hand and gently patted the place where the 2 of them were holding hands. Then, he quietly left the place. He left behind a bottle of water and took away all the communication tools on Song Ying and Gan Hong, even a miniature positioning system on Song Ying's body. Song Ying herself was probably unaware of this positioning system. It was probably a means of protection from her humble home. For this young lady who loved to race, the members of the escort team were also thinking of ways to protect her. It won't be difficult to get out, Luoqiu smiled. If we work together. Gan Hong's physique was naturally much better than Song Ying's. After all, she had stood out from the harsh training in the village. Moreover, as a woman who was naturally much weaker than men, she was still able to stand out from the rest. One could only imagine how good Gan Hong's physique was. Thus, she woke up earlier. At this time, the sky was already slightly bright. Even at the bottom of the cliff, they could roughly see a person's appearance. Gan Hong looked around and gently pushed Song Ying's shoulder to wake her up. After waking up, Song Ying shook her head hard and tried to recall what happened before she fainted. On the way, they were intercepted by a group of small fries. These guys were either Zhong Luoyue or the Zhong family. Their purpose was to look for trouble. But Alpha Romeo suddenly exploded. Song Ying quickly went through the cause and effect of the incident in her mind, and then rejoiced, "We're really lucky to have survived. Gan Hong, what's our situation now?" Gan Hong frowned and said, "We're at the cliff and we've lost all means of communication. The car was completely destroyed, and all I found was a bottle of water. That was the worst-case scenario. But what's worse is that I didn't find Master Chiu." What happened to him?" Song Ying's expression changed slightly. Gan Hong shook her head at this time. "There's no trace of Master Chiu on the wreckage of the sports car. This is the only good news. But it's not much better. Master Chiu may have been thrown out of the car when he fell off the cliff and fell somewhere." Gan Hong looked up at the cliff and said in a low voice, "If he's lucky, he may be injured and can't move for the time being. If he's unlucky, it's likely that he suffered a fatal injury after being thrown out of the sports car." "He's lucky," Song Ying suddenly said. "He's lucky, he'll be fine. I hope so." Gan Hong was silent for a moment and then stood up. "Anyway, what I have to do now is to find Master Chiu. Missing, I've checked your body. There are only some small abrasions, nothing serious. As long as you stay here, someone will come to rescue us soon. They will know that you—" While speaking, Gan Hong stretched her hand to Song Ying's collar. Song Ying was curious about Gan Hong's action, but Gan Hong didn't finish her words and seemed to be stuck. "They will know what about me? It's gone." Gan Hong frowned and took back her hand. "The tracking system installed on you by Uncle Wu is gone." "Uncle Wu? When did this happen? Why don't I know about it?" Song Ying frowned. Gan Hong had to say, "Of course I have to hide it from you. Otherwise, with your character, why would you obediently put a tracking system on yourself?" Song Ying suddenly became silent, and then asked abruptly, "Does Luoqiu have it on him too?" Gan Hong shook her head. "Master Chiu's tracking system is still in the customization stage, so it hasn't been installed yet. So now I have completely lost contact with Master Chiu. This is the most troublesome. I can't determine his current state immediately. Maybe he was rescued by someone?" Song Ying thought of something. Gan Hong frowned. Song Ying hurriedly said, "Don't you think it's strange? When we fell off the cliff, we were clearly in the car. But when we got here, we were outside and we were fine. How did we get out by ourselves? And how did we avoid the car burning?" Gan Hong thought for a while and finally shook her head. Song Ying bit her fingernail. "Luoqiu is gone, but we are still here and obviously someone rescued us. So, the person who rescued us may be Luoqiu. Apart from us, who else could there be in the wilderness around here? Who else could it be except Luoqiu? Then why isn't Master Chiu here?" Gan Hong frowned. "Maybe he saw that we didn't wake up, so he went to find a way around?" Song Ying instantly thought of many possibilities. Maybe he went to find help, or even just some food or water. Don't we only have one bottle of water? I hope so. Gan Hong really couldn't think of any other explanation at this time, so she could only accept Song Ying's explanation subconsciously. I hope there won't be more difficulties. However, at this time, the bottom of the cliff suddenly began to become hazy. The mist of the mountain stream gradually spread from afar. The surrounding mist became thicker and thicker, and not long after, the entire wilderness at the bottom of the cliff was covered by the white mist. Oh no! In this situation, even if the rescue helicopter is dispatched, they won't be able to find us. Song Ying immediately thought of the appearance of the thick mist. For the two of them, it was undoubtedly one disaster after another. The tracking system on Song Ying's body was gone, and the Song family would need to spend a lot of effort to find her, and that was when the visibility was clear. This mist is too fast and too thick, I'm afraid it won't disperse for a while. Gan Hong shook her head, but after all, there are still traces on the road. As long as we don't leave the vicinity, the rescue team will naturally start to search from the scene. Staying here is obviously the best way to do it. Song Ying smiled bitterly. That's right. In this thick mist, there shouldn't be any dangerous creatures. In this damned place, there must be a lot of wild beasts and poisonous snakes, and we can't see. Gan Hong said indifferently, although this place is remote, those wild beasts and poisonous snakes may not come back. They also need to survive, so it's not good to stay in this barren place. But at this time, some strange sounds suddenly came from the thick mist. It was like the cry of some wild beast. Song Ying suddenly jumped up and smiled bitterly. It can't be so accurate. What I said comes true. Maybe Master Chiu is back. Gan Hong was not sure, then she bent down and put her ear on the soil. No. This doesn't sound like the footsteps of people walking. Howl? It's the sound of wolves. Along with Song Ying's alarm, 6 or 7 vague shadows suddenly emerged from the thick mist. When these shadows gradually approached, their shape and sound finally made the two of them very sure of one thing. They were targeted by a pack of wild wolves. But in this place, where did the wolves come from? And there were 7 or 8 of them at once. It seems that the method of staying here is not working. Gan Hong at this time made a prompt decision and grabbed Song Ying's shoulder. We don't have weapons now, so we can't deal with these wild beasts. We can only hide first. This way, follow me. Song Ying only felt that her body was carried, but she didn't say anything, but quickly adjusted her pace. It seemed that at this time, Gan Hong didn't want to find Luoqiu anymore. Not knowing why, at this moment, Song Ying suddenly felt warm in her heart. At this time, the pack of wolves was running behind them, and they quickly hid in the thick mist, hoping to use the thick mist to confuse the wild wolves. I hope so. Song Ying was secretly worried. At the coffee pavilion facing the street. Sir, your coffee. Luoqiu smiled slightly, and then put a small face value bill on the waiter's plate. Ordinary people would also give some tips, but in fact, it didn't need to be too much, because the person who received the tip actually felt happy. This should be a female student who was working part-time. She left with a kind smile, and before she left, she said that he could refill the cup. Luoqiu picked up the coffee. The taste was only average, but it seemed that there were quite a lot of customers in this shop. It seemed that the final result was that Yu Ye's taste had long been raised to be very picky. Luoqiu took a sip, and then began to play with his mobile phone. He was like an ordinary young man, sitting down at the coffee pavilion because he was bored, and then playing with his mobile phone. Either to pass the time or just because he was waiting for someone. No one paid attention to him. But he was paying attention to a guy in a corner of the coffee pavilion. He was in his 40s or 50s, reading a newspaper and smoking from time to time. He looked like a bored middle-aged man who was passing the time. This should be the person who wanted to meet with the male gunman, but obviously, he was not the real employer behind the murder. Very careful. Luoqiu's vision had some slight changes at this time. He could see the middle-aged man's pistol hidden in his clothes, and his shoes. There was also a blade hidden in the shoes, and in the pocket of his clothes, there was a small steel ball. It seemed that a thin steel wire could be pulled out of this small ball, Such a thing could only be used as a murder weapon. Hiring a killer to assassinate Song Ying, and then hiring another killer to kill the former one. Perhaps there was a third killer hiding in the dark, and the target was the second killer. In this way, the clues were broken step by step. Luoqiu yawned. It seemed that it would take some time to find out the real guy behind this. He didn't care about the time now. If he did, Luoqiu would have directly cheated. The club had the most complete information in the world. But Luoqiu wanted to give Song Ying and Gan Hong some time alone, so he simply played this stalker game which could barely kill time here. The big problem was that his emotions had recovered a lot. Luoqiu felt that he would start to do some boring and inefficient things. But people were like this, they would often waste time on unnecessary things. Obviously, they knew it was a waste, but they would still do it as if it was a kind of nature. At this time, the middle-aged man in the corner looked at the time on his watch for the third time. It had been an hour since his appointment with the male gunman. He immediately made a phone call, and soon directly paid the bill and left. Luoqiu didn't intend to follow him. At this time, he just clicked on the mobile phone's GPS. A small red dot appeared on the GPS map. This red dot represented the middle-aged man. He had been unknowingly marked by Luoqiu. It was not a high-tech positioning system, just some means outside of technology, but it was also convenient. The red dot was moving slowly, and soon it began to speed up. It seemed to be sitting on a vehicle like a car. "Sir, do you want a refill?" It was still the waitress at the beginning. Probably because of the tip, she still maintained a sweet smile at this time. "No." Luoqiu shook his head. "Please tell the master that he made a beautiful salad." The waitress nodded. Although the young man had an oriental face, she couldn't help but want to stay with him for a long time. She just wanted to stay for a while because it would make her feel particularly peaceful, as if all the worries had been eliminated. "Then, do you need a little heart? Sandwiches or cookies?" Luoqiu waved his hand and whispered, "I should go. I will come again if I have a chance." Praise and promise were all means to close the distance between people. Of course, there was also a smile. Luoqiu left from the waitress's gaze. He felt that he seemed to be more like his old self, because before he became the boss of the club, he often thought about how to get along with people. Unfortunately, at that time, he was often clear about every step and means, but still lacked the ability to execute. "Actually, I have changed a little myself." Luoqiu turned around and looked at the street in the distance, muttering, unconsciously. He suddenly stopped, because just in front of the street, Luoqiu saw a black car stopped. The people who got off the car were Songde and Mr. Blind. The signboard above the street was Zhonghua Street. Yen 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 PS1. Thank you to Big Boss Chiu Tian's Autumn. Thank you to Big Boss Tang Shi Tianyin, Sect Leader. Thank you to Big Boss Tang Shi Tianyin. Serve the two big bosses with a humble attitude. I mean lowering your head and diligently typing. Chapter 926. Natasha's sister's name was Yuna. Yuna's muscular dystrophy was discovered 5 years ago. After a period of treatment, there was no effect. Later, the high cost of treatment eventually crushed the family, which was not rich. Although the two sisters' parents were still alive, they were farmers living in a remote area. Their parents only knew that the two women had found decent jobs in the big city, but they did not know about Yuna's illness. Yuna was a dancer who had many opportunities to appear on high-end stages. She was somewhat famous in the circle. At that time, Natasha had just graduated from university and worked in a company. Yuna had already bought her own house in the local area with her own effort. Originally, she had planned to work hard for a year or two, and when she had saved more money, she would bring her parents here. But everything turned to the abyss of despair because of Yuna's illness. Later on, although Natasha had some achievements in her work, in addition to paying for Yuna's treatment every month, she still had to send living expenses to her parents at home. Therefore, although Natasha's work looked decent, in fact, she was very tight every month. For this reason, Yuna simply sold the house, and the two sisters moved to Zhonghua Street, where the rent was relatively cheap. The days gradually became stable. Apart from the fact that her legs could not walk normally, Yuna had gotten used to being half as tall as before. She had gotten used to having to raise her head to talk to others. He had also gotten used to the fact that he spent more time sitting than standing. She had also gotten used to not thinking about the stage anymore. In fact, Yuna felt that she was not at the end of her misery. At least, she still had her sister who never left her. However, thinking about it, Yuna suddenly did not want to stay in this house. There were too many memories between her and Natasha here. Their laughter once filled every corner of this simple house. When eating, when watching TV, when washing dishes together. When Natasha wiped her back and changed her clothes. They chatted until dawn, and then watched Natasha with 2 dark circles under her eyes hurriedly go out. She had learned how to cook a Chinese dish from a Chinese family downstairs. When Natasha came back from work. When New Year's Eve was at the window, and watching the bustle of Zhonghua Street. Therefore, she opened the door and left this place with difficulty. The door was unlatched and could be opened with a gentle push. Therefore, Song Da's brows were furrowed. He began to call out Yuna's name in a clumsy localized manner. Actually, as a warrior, Song Da's hearing and senses were outstanding. He could easily sense that Yuna wasn't in the room. He was just a little worried, so his heart was a little chaotic, and it was hard for him to remain calm. No need to shout, there's no one in the house. Mr. Blind glanced at Songda. She should have just left. Since she can't move, she can't have gone far. Let's go look for her. Songda hurriedly nodded. Then Blind Man, wait for me in this house. Go ahead. Mr. Blind nodded. He had never seen Yuna in person, so he couldn't use many of his methods to search for her. The methods that he could use weren't worth using. He was studying Natasha's transformation as a living corpse. It could be said that he was influenced by Natasha's karma. This time, he had accompanied Songda here in order to understand this karma. If it could be cured, then it would be cured. If it couldn't be cured, then it would be compensated. Karma would disappear by itself. After Songda left, Mr. Blind simply sat down in this house and carefully considered some things. Last night, he went to his humble home and discussed some things with Old Master Song before he went to sleep. When Old Master Song heard that Mr. Blind was also planning to return to China, he agreed without hesitation and promised that he would arrange everything so that Mr. Blind could return to China comfortably. It was not wrong for cultivators to emphasize wealth, companionship, cultivation methods, and location. This was especially true when the spiritual chi of the world was scarce, so wealth was especially important. Actually, all these years, by relying on the Song clan, Mr. Blind had already obtained quite a lot of precious cultivation resources. This made him involuntarily recall the time when he left China and traveled all over the world. When he crossed the ocean, he sat on a smuggled fishing boat. That feeling was really not good. It was much more comfortable to take a plane. February 2nd, the dragon raises its head. This time, Senior Brother really found the missing dragon vein. Mr. Blind muttered to himself. At the same time, he began to pinch his fingers as if he was calculating something. And this scene naturally fell into the line of sight of a certain person on the rooftop of the opposite building, Luocchio's observation. The combination of Songda and Mr. Blind naturally made Luocchio curious, and the place where the two of them came together just happened to be in this Zhonghua Street. Luocchio's line of sight looked down at this time. Songda walked out of the apartment building and began to walk hurriedly on the street, as if he was looking for something. At this time, Luocchio glanced at his mobile phone again. On the mobile phone's navigation map, the marked red dot was still moving, but it seemed to be circling around a large semicircle. It seems that he still intends to circle around. Luocchio just glanced at it and didn't continue to pay attention to it. At this time, he was on the rooftop of the building and had a very wide view. He could see more than half of Zhonghua Street. Songda was looking around in the crowd, and on the other side, a woman with a walking stick was also stumbling along. Before he became the boss of the club, Luo Qiu was a person who was very good at killing time, by observing different kinds of people. In fact, he was just in a daze all day. The experience during that period of time made Luo Qiu develop a strange feeling that even he himself couldn't explain. He would be inexplicably interested in something. If he continued to pay attention, he would often see many unexpected things. In general, Ren Xiling once said that Luo Qiu was more like a paparazzi than she was. He was simply a born reporter. But it was a pity that Luo Qiu had no interest in interviewing others. At this time, the woman walked into a tea house in Zhonghua Street. This kind of tea house actually had a special feature, that was, the customers inside could drink tea while watching the drama. This was an opera tea house run by an overseas Chinese. Even so, the opera troupe invited here was not a well-known group. However, for foreigners and Chinese in Zhonghua Street, a group of actresses and actresses would probably be regarded as well-known if the boss made a few eye-catching advertising slogans. Obviously, this was a very effective means. At least, in the past half-year, when most of the shops in Zhonghua Street were not doing well, this tea house was still lively. "Yuna, you're here again?" At this time, the receptionist of the tea house saw a woman struggling in with a pair of walking sticks, and hurriedly walked up. Not all the people working in Zhonghua Street were Chinese, there were also many foreign employees here. The receptionist was such a group of people. She was in her 30s, with a plump figure, wearing a red Chong Sam specially customized by the tea house boss, which was very attractive. This receptionist had known Yuna for some time. She also lived in Zhonghua Street, and the place where she and Yuna met was the vegetable market at the end of Zhonghua Street. Yuna had difficulty moving and a pitiful past, so it was easy for her to arouse the pity and sympathy of others. In fact, Yuna had received a lot of help in Zhonghua Street. But after all, she was not her relative, and a lot of help was actually limited. "Yuna? You don't look well today." The receptionist reached out to support Yuna, leading her in and helping her sit down. Yuna was a frequent customer of this tea house. In her free time, she would come here alone to watch the opera performances here for the whole afternoon. But she would leave on time. At dinner time, she would definitely leave. She often smiled and told the receptionist that she had thought of a good idea today, and should be able to give Natasha a delicious meal. So enviable, the two sisters. "I want to be alone," Yuna said softly. "Don't tell your boss that I'm here." Okay. The receptionist nodded. "I'll get you a glass of water." In fact, besides knowing the receptionist here, Yuna also knew the boss of this tea house. The boss of this tea house even had the intention to pursue Yuna, but she had never accepted. Later on, the two of them became good friends. So every time Yuna came, she would be able to get a private room, or it could be said that the boss of the tea house had specially reserved it for this friend. The boss of the tea house still hadn't given up, the receptionist thought. But she would not specially tell the boss of the tea house to come over just because of this. Yuna looked like she had a lot on her mind. She probably really wanted to be alone and watch something she liked. She remembered that Yuna had once said that she was very envious of the leading actress on this stage. The receptionist quickly brought a glass of water and put it on the table. At this time, Yuna was already leaning against the window, silently watching the stage below. The gongs and drums sounded, and a play had begun. The receptionist quietly left this small private room on the second floor. As Yuna watched, a drop of tears slid down. This place was the only place she could think of where she could escape from some things. But here it was easier for her to recall many things. "Sorry to disturb you." Suddenly, a man's voice came from outside the private room. Yuna was startled. She hurriedly wiped the corners of her eyes with her hand and turned around. She saw a cart full of steamers push in through the bead curtain, followed by a young man in a tea house staff uniform. He should also be Chinese. Judging from his skin color and hair color, Yuna could not tell the nationality of an Asian. If the other party did not speak, it was really hard to tell. But she did not remember such a young staff member in this tea house. Was he recently hired? Probably. Yuna thought that she had not been here for more than half a month. If he was an old staff member, he would not casually walk in like this. Yuna shook her head and looked at the young man, saying, "Sorry, I don't want to eat for the time being. You can go back." "Miss, aren't you hungry?" The young man smiled and suddenly opened one of the steamers in the cart. Speaking of which, this tea house was really a strange combination. There were people singing Beijing opera downstairs, and there were many people pushing carts selling food in the lobby. These were Cantonese desserts. The young man opened the steamer, and the dessert inside was shrimp dumplings. "No, I really can't eat." Yuna still shook her head. The young man sighed and said, "What a pity. It seems that there really is nothing here that you like to eat." Yuna only hoped that this young man could leave as soon as possible. Her expression had already become somewhat impatient. But this young man still said calmly, "Well, miss, do you have anything you like to eat? If you can, please tell me. I will ask the kitchen to add it next time. You know, the opinions of our customers are very important to us." "No, I really don't." Yuna faintly frowned. This young man was patient or very long-winded. At this moment, he still insisted, "Well, miss, what about your friends? You will come with your friends one day, right? If we can know what your friends like, I think it will definitely improve the customer's satisfaction towards us." "No." "Then, what about your family?" he suddenly asked. "No." Yuna just spat out a word, and then her whole body froze. She sighed and raised her head, saying, "Do you have Shanghai Zilongbao? My sister likes to eat this dish." "Of course." The young man glanced at many small steamers in the dining cart, and finally took one out from the corner and put it in front of Yuna. He began to arrange the bowls and chopsticks in the cupboard of the dining car, and put a small steamed bun from the steamer into Yuna's bowl. Finally, he made a gesture of "Please enjoy." The service was quite good. Yuna looked at the Zilongbao in her bowl, and didn't eat for a long time. She subconsciously raised her head and glanced at the young man in the tea house. He said, "Give it a try. It was just made, so it should taste the best when it was made." Yuna nodded silently, and clumsily picked up the Zilongbao with her chopsticks, and slowly put it into her mouth. She first took a small bite, chewed in her mouth, and then swallowed. After a while, Yuna put down her chopsticks, looked at the young man, and showed a smile uglier than crying. She choked, "Delicious. As long as you are satisfied." The young man smiled. "Then, I won't disturb your meal." Seeing the young man leave with the cart, Yuna subconsciously called him, and said the names of several kinds of food. "Do you have all these?" "Yes." The young man nodded, and then took the corresponding steamer from the dining cart. Chapter 9:27. "Thank you." Songda quickly nodded to a passerby in front of him, because he had just learned of Yuna's whereabouts from this passerby. She was in a hodgepodge of tea houses in front of him. It was very difficult to find someone, but Yuna's features were very obvious, so it was not that difficult. Songda hurriedly walked into the tea house. As soon as he entered, Songda heard the chaotic sound of gongs and drums. What kind of mediocre drama troupe was scaring people here? Songda frowned with some disdain. He looked around in the lobby, and soon saw Yuna sitting in a small private room on the second floor. He hurriedly went up the stairs and walked towards this small private room. At this time, a waiter of the tea house was walking towards him with a dining cart. He seemed to be slightly lowering his head. Songda did not pay attention to him, and just hurried past him, and then quickly walked into the room where Yuna was. This young waiter of the tea house turned around at this time, and then smiled, and then disappeared. "Luochio, I've finally found you!" Songda lifted the beaded curtain, and at a glance saw Yuna eating silently. He seemed to be relieved, but also seemed to be a little reproachful. He frowned and sat down, and subconsciously said, "It's very dangerous for you to walk out like this, you know?" Yuna was startled, and suddenly remembered the appearance of this big man wearing an apron yesterday. She thought that he was probably a person with a strong sense of responsibility, right? I'm fine. Yuna shook her head and slowly said, "At least my mood is better now. It's amazing, I didn't do anything, I just ate some food, and I feel different." Songda opened his mouth, and then scratched his head, not knowing how to continue. Although Song Air and Song Air were very good at playing with women, Songda had never touched a woman all these years. On one hand, it was because of the cultivation method he practiced, and on the other hand, he was born to be a little dull towards women, and did not know how to get along with them. Well, eating does make people feel better, especially when they are hungry. Songda nodded. I remember when I was cultivating with Master, I was often punished with no dinner because I was too stupid. Every time this happens, I'm always in a bad mood. Actually, what I want to say is that you should eat something. After all, you haven't eaten anything since yesterday. Sooner or later, you'll starve to death. Probably, Yuna replied listlessly. Even now, she still didn't have much of an appetite. However, miraculously, she was able to eat these desserts. This might be because of what the young man said. Actually, he didn't seem to have said much. But it had miraculously changed some of her thoughts. Thinking of this, Yuna suddenly felt that this young man was somewhat mysterious. She subconsciously glanced at the lobby of the tea house below, but she didn't see this young man. Yuna put down the chopsticks in her hand and suddenly looked at Songda. Is there anything else you need from me? He used the word and. For Yuna, Songda brought the news of Natasha's death. In fact, she didn't feel anything in her heart at all. Instead, she felt some resentment. If Songda didn't appear, perhaps she would never have felt that kind of pain. However, she herself had no reason to blame him, so she used the word and. Songda didn't seem to understand the meaning behind her words. He immediately said, "It's like this. I brought a friend here. He is very good at treating illnesses. I think if he can help you take a look, you might be able to get better." Mr. Blind is really super awesome, Songda thought at this time. However, Yuna didn't show a happy expression as Songda imagined. Instead, she was not very interested and frowned. Why do you want to help me?" "Because." Songda opened his mouth. He really couldn't tell the truth. However, making up a reason on the spot was not something he was good at. He suddenly became speechless. Yuna said indifferently, "Are you Natasha's colleague?" Songda shook his head. Yuna asked again, "Then are you her friend? Or were you there during the disaster? You couldn't save her, so you feel guilty?" Songda continued to be speechless. He didn't think that this woman who couldn't move could be so meticulous. She had almost guessed the truth of the matter. Moreover, Yuna's words became sharper and sharper. "I just can't move. I'm not completely disabled. I can take care of myself." Yuna said indifferently, "I don't need sympathy or pity, because these things can't be given to me for a lifetime. So, you'd better not care about me. But I'm sincerely grateful that you helped me bring back Natasha's belongings." "This won't do." Songda clenched his teeth. If he just left Yuna like this, he felt that he would be possessed. He had thought about this matter carefully all night. Don't you want to be on the stage again?" Songda said seriously. "Now there's one right in front of you. If you're cured, you can continue your dream. But even if you can't be cured, at least it won't be worse than it is now. Why don't you give yourself a chance?" Yuna was silent for a moment, and finally shook her head. "Because you haven't told me the reason. I won't be able to accept it like this. To me, this world is full of countless difficulties. I don't have the confidence to overcome them one by one. So, I don't want to receive this kind of baffling help. Because I don't know what I'll have to pay in the future if I receive this kind of help." "No need. You don't have to pay anything to cure your symptoms," Songda now promised. "Once you get better, it'll be as simple as getting better. You don't have to pay anything." "Then I can't accept it even more." Yuna shook her head. At this moment, she hurriedly propped herself up and took her crutch. Sorry, I have to go. Please don't come looking for me in the future. Think about it. Songda hurriedly stood up. But Yuna now looked coldly at Songda. One more thing. Even if you help me, it doesn't mean that you can casually look through my privacy. That's too despicable. Songda was once again speechless. He had indeed peeked through the last few days of Yuna's writing. So there would be a day like this where even a martial arts master would not be able to withstand a few words. Songda did not chase after him this time, but he suddenly remembered what the old monk in the temple had said when he was still learning martial arts from his master. Words are the most powerful force in this secular world. Songda sighed, and then silently glanced at the several steamers on the table in this small private room. He thought to himself, at least this woman is willing to eat something. He took out his phone and dialed Mr. Blind's number. Songda was now somewhat discouraged. I say, blind man, why don't we go back for now? My king, how was the battle today? I challenged several generals of the Han camp with my spear, but I was outnumbered. It was difficult to win. This is the death of my Chu, not the fault of war. Victory and defeat for the military is normal. What's there to worry about? Prepare some wine, let's drink a few cups with my king to relieve our boredom. On the stage, a song called Farewell My Concubine was being sung. Beside it, gongs and drums were beating from time to time. A kind of sorrowful atmosphere was spreading from the stage through the music. Good. Suddenly, in another private room of the tea-house, there was a low cheer. The person who was cheering was a middle-aged man wearing a white suit and gold-rimmed glasses. This middle-aged man in a white suit was the president of the Zhonghua Street Chamber of Commerce, Bai Shuitang. At this time, the person accompanying Bai Shuitang was a thin man around 37 or 38 years old. In fact, this thin man was also surnamed Bai. He was Bai Shuitang's cousin, called Bai Zhan. But most of the time, Bai Zhan wouldn't directly call Bai Shuitang big brother. Instead, like other people, he would call Bai Shuitang President Bai. Actually, this tea-house didn't have an opera to begin with. It was just that Bai Shuitang liked to listen to music, so Bai Zhan had catered to his tastes and found this group of performers from Hua Nation. Not long after, a flustered man was escorted in. This flustered man was holding a medium-sized luggage bag in his hand. At that moment, when this flustered man saw Bai Shuitang sitting there, he dropped to his knees. His panic turned into alarm, and he almost stuttered, President Bai, you're good at scheming. I heard you're planning to travel, is that right? Bai Shuitang calmly picked up a teacup and slowly steeped tea and tea leaves with the lid. He suddenly turned his head and fixed his gaze on the man as he said indifferently, Is there anywhere you can recommend? I've been wanting to take a breather recently. This man called Accountant Yu hurriedly crawled to the side of the table and said in alarm, President Bai, I was wrong. I was really wrong. Let me go, I beg you to let me go, let me go. Otherwise, the Song family won't let me off. Bai Shuitang said indifferently, With me around, why wouldn't the Song family let you off? At that moment, Accountant Yu grabbed Bai Shuitang's leg with a pleading look on his face. President Bai, 2 days ago, missing had someone come to the finance department to collect the account books and bring all the receipts for fees and expenses. So what? Bai Shuitang took a sip of tea, then put down the teacup and turned around to look at Yu Huiji. Haven't you always done your accounts properly? Yu Huiji's expression instantly turned a little unsightly. He stammered and didn't dare speak. At that moment, one of the men who had escorted Yu Huiji over directly took out a pistol from his belt, loaded it, and then pressed the tip of the gun to the back of Accountant Yu's head. Accountant Yu trembled all over, and with a long face, he slapped himself repeatedly and cried, I deserve to die. President Bai, I was greedy, I was wrong. It was I who tampered with the accounts later on. But it really wasn't much. I only took a few $100,000. For the Song dynasty, This is just a drop in the bucket. But this missing is too awesome. She actually calculated such a small amount. I really didn't do it on purpose. President Bai, you have to save me. Bai Shuetang said expressionlessly. Have you handed in those accounts and the original receipts for the money? Accountant Yu hurriedly said, No. How would I dare hand them over? President Bai, it's not like you don't know how many of these accounts are fake. Once we hand them over, we won't be able to get away with it. That's why I said it would take some time to sort them out and sent them away then. Bai Shuetang snorted coldly and interrupted Accountant Yu. Accountant Yu hurriedly corrected himself in horror. I mean, once I hand them over, I'll be dead for sure. President Bai Shuetang bent down slightly, less than a palm's distance away from Yu Huiji. At this time, he reached out and gently patted Accountant Yu's cheek a few times. He said regretfully, You're so smart. I've reminded you many times that we have to do our best for the Song family. We can't be greedy, but why don't you listen? Yes, I deserve to die, I was greedy. I deserve to die. Accountant Yu hurriedly lowered his head, not daring to look at Bai Shuetang. Unexpectedly, at this moment, Yu Huiji felt a sharp pain in his scalp. President Bai Shuetang directly grabbed Yu Huiji's hair, then pulled his head hard and slammed it against the edge of the table. Bang! This hit knocked over some things on the table. Bai Shuetang erupted like a volcano. Then how dare you tamper with the accounts behind my back? The collision made Accountant Yu see stars and feel dizzy. 2 of his teeth were knocked out, and 2 streams of blood flowed out from his nostrils. Bai Shuetang didn't let him go. With a ferocious face, he grabbed Accountant Yu's hair again and slammed him against the floor. Why don't you listen to me? How many times have I told you? How many times have I told you? Why don't you listen to me? Say it. Say it. Why don't you speak? What? Accountant Yu was hit again and again. In the end, he was almost half-conscious. It was very tragic. Seeing this, Bai Zhan hurriedly pulled up Bai Shuetang's arm. President Bai, it's useless to kill him now. The most important thing is to deal with the aftermath. Bai Shuetang sighed, stood up, tidied up his clothes, and said indifferently, I've asked someone to deal with the aftermath. You don't need to worry about this. You just need to look after the reconstruction project of Zhonghua Street. Okay. Bai Zhan nodded, then looked at Accountant Yu, who was paralyzed on the floor. Then what should we do with this guy? Doesn't he like to travel? Bai Shuetang sat down again and drank his tea. Then let's send him on a trip. Chop him up and throw him into the sea. I'll let him travel around the world. Bai Zhan subconsciously swallowed his saliva, but he quickly waved his hand. What are you waiting for? Why aren't you going? Only then did the 2 men hurriedly drag Accountant Yu out. At this time, only Bai Shuetang and Bai Zhan were left in the private room. Bai Zhan whispered, Big brother, you said that the aftermath has been dealt with. What do you mean, at this time? Bai Shuetang looked at the scene of Yu Ji committing suicide on the stage below and sneered. What a good play. Overlord? It's not certain who's the overlord. This. Bai Zhan had a bad feeling, but he didn't say anything. Although the man in front of him was his cousin, he had many tricks up his sleeve. Even family members felt abnormally afraid. Han Bing, he killed his way in. In my opinion, this. Yu Ji committed suicide and the maids helped her down. Curtain call. Then, in the applause, Luoqiu sitting in the crowd suddenly glanced at the entrance of the tea-house, only to see a middle-aged man quietly walk in with his head lowered. Luoqiu glanced at his mobile phone. The red dot on the navigation map had moved here. It seems that it's just an extra move, Luoqiu thought, looking up at the 2nd floor of the tea-house. A private room. Yin. Chapter 928. The ordinary-looking middle-aged man lowered his head as he walked up to the 2nd floor of the tea-house. He arrived in front of Bai Shuetang's private room. Bai Shuetang glanced at the figure behind the beaded curtain and waved his hand casually. Bai Zhan, who was beside him, understood and directly walked out. When he walked out, Bai Zhan glanced at the middle-aged man and found that he was not fat. However, his face was very big and gave off a fierce feeling. Moreover, his eyes were very cold. Bai Zhan did not say much and immediately walked up the stairs and left. The middle-aged man opened the beaded curtain and walked into the private room. He sat down opposite Bai Xuetang and took the tea that Bai Xuetang poured for him. That guy didn't come, but I received the report that he completed the mission. The middle-aged man said in a low voice, "In the wee hours of the morning, I sent people to check the scene. There were traces of explosions everywhere. One of the cars was indeed blown off the cliff. If she was in the car at that time, there was no possibility of her survival." Bai Xuetang listened quietly. Suddenly, Bai Xuetang stood up and walked back and forth in the private room with his hands behind his back. He lowered his head and pondered. "Why don't you think he came after completing the mission?" The middle-aged man said, "There are several possibilities. First, he might know that we will kill him after the mission, so he didn't come. Second, he knew the target's background, so he didn't dare to stay. He simply didn't ask for the rest of the money and directly fled. There is also the possibility that he is dead." Bai Xuetang said, "Which possibility do you think it is?" The middle-aged man pondered for a moment. "It should be the second possibility. After all, this guy was a bit greedy. Otherwise, he wouldn't have accepted this mission." Bai Xuetang suddenly said, "Why not the third possibility?" The middle-aged man said, "If it was the third possibility, unless the Song family had the ability to predict the future, it would be impossible for them to immediately find and kill or capture him after he succeeded." That makes sense." Bai Xuetang nodded and then said in a low voice, "It's fine if he ran away and never came back. However, I don't want such a thing to happen. Let's go and see if this guy has anyone he cares about. Even if he is an orphan, there will always be people and things that he can't let go of." The middle-aged man nodded and said, "Then, what do you plan to do with the Song family?" Bai Xuetang looked at his watch. "It's already so late. Old Song should be awake by now. The Song family probably already knows what happened. Fifth brother can't hide it. Song Tianyu, that old geezer, is probably going to get angry. I heard that his heart hasn't been well these past few years. Maybe we can just anger him to death and save us the trouble." The middle-aged man sneered. Bai Xuetang shook his head and said, "Don't underestimate anyone from the Song family. Even without Song Tianyu, the Song family still had Song Haoran, who was the most terrifying person in the Song family. As long as Song Haoran is alive, the Song family will not fall, and the iris flowers will not disappear." When Bai Xuetang mentioned iris flower, the middle-aged uncle suddenly gripped the teacup in his hand. Because he gripped it too hard, the tea in the teacup shook violently. Bai Xuetang turned around and looked at the middle-aged uncle. He said indifferently, "Basil, if you can't control your emotions, I won't continue to cooperate with you." The middle-aged uncle. Basil slowly raised his head. He suddenly reached out and grabbed his own hair. He pulled out all his hair. It turned out that he was wearing a wig. After taking off the wig, there was an ugly burn mark on the top of Basil's head. Basil stared at Bai Xuetang. "One day, you'll experience what I've experienced." Bai Xuetang pressed his hands on the table and leaned over. He looked into Basil's eyes and said coldly, "Don't talk nonsense. Don't forget who attacked my brother and sister-in-law first. If your family wasn't stupid and dared to blow up my brother and sister-in-law's car, your small country wouldn't have been destroyed by the Song family. You brought this upon yourself." Basil snorted. "That guy is a sinner of the country and has been convicted long ago. We've offered it to them, but the Song family still refused to let it go. I'll never forget that day when they attacked and massacred the entire palace." Bai Xuetang snorted. "The Song family is ruthless, especially when it comes to Song Tianyu. More than 10 years ago, Song Tianyu wasn't like now. concealing his strength and biding his time. He was a ruthless person. The Song family has always been an eye for an eye and blood for blood to their enemies, especially their life and death grudges. Your family killed Song Tianyo's daughter and son-in-law, so he'll naturally exterminate your family. Song Tianyu is already merciful for not burying your small country with them. Basil also said coldly, "You're not a good person either." Bai Shuitang didn't comment. He slowly sat down and said indifferently, "Basil, I don't view you as an enemy, but as a partner. You want to exterminate the Song family, and I want the Song family's wealth. We each take what we need. I'm just reminding you that before you succeed, you'd better not let your anger overwhelm your rationality." Basil raised his cup and swallowed the tea in it. He remained silent. Bai Shuitang tidied up his clothes and stood up. "I'm about to go to work. I'll inform you if there's any news." Basil suddenly said, "In 2 days, all my men will be here." Bai Shuitang frowned. "So soon? It's much earlier than the original plan." Basil said, "They can't wait that long. They've been patient for a long time in the past 10 years. If I don't satisfy them, even I can't control it. Hatred is not a good thing." Bai Shuitang shook his head. "I'll act according to the circumstances. That's the best." Basil looked at Bai Shuitang's back as he left, his eyes full of strong killing intent. "The Song family's wealth by you? That's my wealth for restoring my country." In fact, it was only a few hundred meters from the tea house to the Chamber of Commerce's office on Zhonghua Street, but Bai Shuitang still left in his car. At this time, the performance in the tea house had finished, and the next performance would be in the afternoon. Luoqiu glanced at Basil. Basil also went downstairs not long after, but he didn't leave through the front door of the tea house. Luoqiu thought for a moment. It seemed like what Song Ying said was true. A family like the Song family was indeed full of hidden murderous intentions. He shook his head, put down the tea money on the table, and left. At this time, Luoqiu first went to the market on Zhonghua Street to buy some things, then walked downstairs to Yuna's house. He found that Mr. Blind and Song Da had also left. Yuna was alone at home, and he didn't know what she was thinking. Luoqiu didn't stay, and walked toward the Chamber of Commerce on Zhonghua Street. He didn't enter the Chamber of Commerce, but went to the alley where the back door of the Chamber of Commerce on Zhonghua Street was. When he first came to this place, Song Haoran had brought him here once. Luoqiu was very interested in the Gate of Life, that Master Song had specially set up, but at that time, the Gate of Life had been secretly sealed by Bai Shuitang. At this time, the Gate of Life wasn't sealed. When he came here, Luoqiu happened to see a woman open the Gate of Life, but she walked out with a gloomy expression. Luoqiu walked to the side of the woman without any sense of presence. At this time, a man in a suit walked out of the Gate of Life. He should be an employee of the Chamber of Commerce. The man said coldly, "Go back and think about it. We can help you with that, but there are new rules now. You know, there's no such thing as a free lunch in this world." The middle-aged woman begged. "I had no choice but to knock on the Gate of Life. Didn't Master Song say that no matter what difficulties there were, as long as you were a Chinese person from Zhonghua Street, you could come?" "That was in the past." The man in the suit said impatiently. "Master Song said that, yes. But don't you think about what era it is now? Song family is such a big family. How much does it cost to raise such a large group of people? You people who came to knock on the Gate of Life, just say a few words and we're just manpower and material resources. Who can bear it after a long time? If you want to help, you can pay according to the difficulty of the matter. This is the current rule." The middle-aged woman said sadly, "If I have enough money, do I still need to come here to knock on the Gate of Life? Wasn't he already at the end of his rope? Big brother, please do me a favor." "No money." The man in the suit chuckled. "Don't you still have a house? As long as you mortgage this house to us, we'll settle your matter for you immediately." The middle-aged woman said nervously, "No way. We worked hard for half of our lives to earn this house. It's the dowry for my daughter. Go away, do whatever you want." The man in the suit waved his hand and directly closed the gate of life. This was a new door after being renovated. What should I do? The middle-aged woman was worried. She walked out of this small alley in a daze. After the middle-aged woman left, Luocio came in front of this new door. He touched it and suddenly sighed. The reversal of life and death has become the gate of death. Shaking his head, Luocio, who was about to leave, suddenly looked at the corner of this small alley and walked over. What was placed in the corner was an old door panel. There were many rust stains on it. Some of the places where the wood was inlaid had even started to rot. Luocio squatted down and wiped his hand. His hand was full of dust. This door panel was the real gate of life. It was just that it had been dismantled. Luocio tapped on this door panel a few times with his finger and then listened quietly. Fortunately, it's not completely dead yet. 10 whole months had passed. At this time, a real chill could be felt in the entire house. Song Tianyu, who was holding a crutch, sat upright on the seat of honor in the main hall of this house. His face was frosty. This old man, who had already become kind, was like an Azura at this moment. 10 hours. Song Tianyu suddenly knocked on his crutch. 10 whole hours have passed. Old 5, you're only telling me this now. Are you thinking of rebelling? Looking at the pale Song Tianyu, whose lips were trembling, the 5th uncle lowered his head in silence. Song Tianyu was too agitated and couldn't help coughing. Song Haoran had to quickly go forward and patted his back, saying, "Dad, 5th uncle is loyal. Too loyal." Song Tianyu coldly snorted, "You think you can hide it from me without letting me know? But have you ever thought, what if you really can't find the person? Old 5. Do you think I'm a person who can't take the blow and will enter the coffin at any time?" "Old master, I'm sorry." 5th uncle still lowered his head. Song Tianyu's whole body softened at this time. He held his forehead and said sadly, "Song Ying and Luocio. How can I face Xiao Ying's mother and my elder brother? Lao Wu, you're old and muddle-headed." "I'm sorry, old master." 5th uncle lowered his head even more. "We didn't find Ying and Luocio's traces at the scene. Even Gan Hong is missing. So they might not be in trouble." Song Haoran said calmly, "We've already called for help, but there's a large amount of fog below the cliff. It's too difficult to search, so I'm afraid it'll take some time." Song Tianyu took a deep breath and knocked his walking stick on the ground. "Investigate. Find out who it is. The sports car won't explode for no reason. Find the mole, I'll make him suffer 3 to 6 holes. I'll use the family law myself. Ing will be fine." At this moment, Song Haoran said in a low voice, "Since Mr. Blind has given Xiao Ying's fortune and said that she will live a life of riches, she will naturally be blessed by the heavens. Father, you should at least understand Mr. Blind's words." "I hope so." Song Tianyu sighed and said, "Old 5, don't lower your head, stand up straight." Only then did 5th uncle stand up straight. "I'll settle this matter for you after we find Xiao Ying." Song Tianyu said in a low voice, "Go and make the arrangements. I want to go to the scene personally and see Luocio and Song Ying return." "Old master, I'll do it right away." 5th uncle hurried out. Song Haoran patted Song Tianyu's shoulder and said, "Don't worry, I'll go down the mountain to find them. You should trust my intuition, right?" 5th uncle hurried back, "Old master, Mr. Blind is back. Invite him over." Song Tianyu stood up. It was almost impossible to see anything in the thick fog. They couldn't tell north from south, east from west, and didn't know what was in front of them. Song Ying and Gan Hong walked very slowly. Their bodies were tied with a tree vine, which Gan Hong had picked up from the ground. The reason for tying it was to prevent them from suddenly stepping on air and getting separated. However, the fog seemed to be getting thicker. Song Ying, who was walking behind them, could only see a shadow of Gan Hong's back. "Those wild wolves shouldn't be able to catch up with us," Gan Hong stopped. Missing, you must be tired. Take a rest here. Saying this, Gan Hong brought over the only bottle of mineral water she found after waking up. Song Ying was really thirsty. She took it subconsciously, opened it and poured it into her mouth, but she stopped after 2 mouthfuls. She also remembered the fact that there was only 1 bottle of water beside her, but at this time she had already drunk a third of the water. I've had enough. You should drink some too. Song Ying brought the water back. If you fall down due to dehydration, it will be more troublesome for me. You should be the one who needs to maintain your strength first. Gan Hong hesitated for a moment, but finally took it and took a small sip to moisten her lips. Although the fog was dense, it was summer now. This place was hot and humid. They were sweating profusely. Soon, just sweating alone would cause symptoms of dehydration. At this moment they found a big rock and sat down. Song Ying looked at the vast expanse of whiteness in front of her, and shook her head. It was easy to feel despair in such a situation. Gan Hong, let's say something. It's too quiet here. Song Ying suddenly said. Gan Hong said, What do you want to say? Song Ying rolled her eyes and said, How about the story of a wild man? I heard from my uncle that he explored the thick fog and chased after a wild man. Gan Hong didn't respond, so Song Ying said, Then I'll say it. A long time ago, there was a wild man with long hair living in the mountains. This wild man was very strong and cruel. The voice of a story. Yin 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 Yin. Chapter 929. The story of the savage in the fog was soon finished. After that, Song Ying and Gan Hong recovered some strength and continued their journey. They were still using vines to entangle each other, but the fog seemed to be thicker than before, to the extent that they couldn't even see their own fingers. For this reason, Gan Hong had to pick up a branch from the ground to explore the way. In fact, they didn't know where they were going. It was even possible that they were actually walking in circles and didn't go far. After all, it was hard to guarantee the sense of direction in such a state. Oh right. Song Ying suddenly stopped. The slight pulling force of the vines also made Gan Hong stop. Song Ying suddenly stepped forward and said, You! Why did you leave without saying goodbye at that time? Gan Hong said indifferently, Miss Ying, what do you mean? Song Ying said discontentedly, You know. I mean, why did you suddenly quit being my bodyguard? Why did you suddenly leave? Gan Hong said, The matter of me being your bodyguard was arranged by the village. When the time came, the village called me back. I was just following the order. Order? Song Ying frowned. Couldn't you say a word about an order before leaving? Why did you suddenly change a guy who had nothing to do with me? Was it because of that matter that the village called you back? But at that time, you obviously tried your best, and… Gan Hong was silent for a moment and finally said in a low voice, Sorry, an order is an order. It's also a fact that I'm not capable enough. Your safety is very important, so it's necessary to arrange a more capable person to protect you. Song Ying said loudly, As long as it's an order? Even if it's to send you to a strange man or even let you sleep with him. Master Chiu is not such a person. Gan Hong just shook her head, saying softly, He's much gentler than we imagined, just a bit indifferent. She remembered the time in the vineyard. Luo Chiu took off his shoes first, and then she had a reason to take off her shoes. Some very small things could better reflect a person's character. He had never looked at her with an invasive gaze. Because he was worried that her situation would worsen, he accepted old Master Song's gift. Even though it wasn't a long time, Gan Hong felt that time passed very slowly and quickly while accompanying this new young master. What was slow was that it always seemed to be a leisurely time. It was fast because the leisurely and peaceful time would always pass by unknowingly. I can't tell. Song Ying muttered, then shook her head. Forget it, let's not talk about it. There's no point in talking about it. I don't even know if this guy is dead or alive. Gan Hong suddenly said, Actually, Miss Ying, you are also a very gentle person. Song Ying sighed. At this time, don't flatter me. I don't like to hear these words. Have you forgotten? Gan Hong smiled, but this smile was covered by the thick fog. Song Ing could only see the vague outline of Gan Hong's face. Shoo! Gan Hong suddenly said, telling Song Ing not to speak first. After a while, Song Ing could not help but ask, "What's wrong? Could it be that those wolves from before have chased us all the way here?" Gan Hong said, "I heard the sound of flowing water. There should be a water source nearby here." Then, Song Ing felt the pulling force from the vines tied to her body. She had no choice but to move subconsciously. Gan Hong was trained in the village. It was said that all the training programs were carried out according to the program of one of the most powerful special forces soldiers in China. The elimination rate was unusually high. Therefore, her hearing, eyesight, touch, reflexes, and so on were all above the standard for such a young girl. It seems to be a small stream. Gan Hong squatted down and reached out to touch a few times. She found the water source in the grass. "Can we drink it?" Song Ing asked with concern. Gan Hong shook her head and said, "My vision is too poor. I can't see clearly if the water source is contaminated. I don't have the tools, so I can't boil it. If it's not a last resort, I don't recommend drinking it directly. But we can stay here. If the rescue team finds a water source, they should follow the flow of the water to find us. This way, our chances of being rescued will increase by a lot." Okay. Song Ing shook the mineral water bottle that was less than half full. It was not really the time to drink the water of this stream. But it seemed that it would not last long. It was too stuffy here. She could wring out water from her clothes. "But it's okay to wash your face." Gan Hong knew that Song Ing was a little bit of a clean freak, so she had to lower her standards at this time. Song Ing could not stand the stickiness on her body. Now that she heard Gan Hong's words, she grabbed the corner of her clothes and took them off without hesitation. Next was her pants. Now she only had 2 pieces of underwear left. Of course, in such an environment, she was not afraid of being seen by others. At this time, at Gan Hong's reminder, Song Ing slowly walked into the stream and tested the depth of the water. After finding that it was okay, she squatted down and began to wash her body. "I feel like I'm alive," Song Ing exclaimed. At this time, Gan Hong just stood silently by the stream, paying attention to the surrounding environment, because when she woke up, the weapon on her body was gone. At this time, she was only holding a broken branch sharpened with a stone. But at this time, a bit of cold water splashed on her body. Then she felt that her ankle was caught by something and pulled down. With a splash, Gan Hong fell into the stream. The bodyguard would be alert to everything around, but not to the person they needed to protect. After falling into the water, the cool water made Gan Hong shiver suddenly, followed by a burst of comfort. But she still kept a straight face. "Missing, you're too relaxed. You're too nervous." Song Ing shook her head and suddenly reached out to touch Gan Hong's thigh. Gan Hong usually wore trousers, or at the very least, black socks, because there was a hideous scar on her thigh. Through the trousers, Song Ing gently stroked the scar inside Gan Hong's thigh and said softly, "Does it still hurt?" Gan Hong sat in the stream, soaking wet, and her skin became unusually sensitive. But to Song Ying's question, she just responded lightly, "It's just a superficial wound." Song Ying suddenly said, "At that time, if the knife was a little bit off, it would have pierced your chest, right? If it happened again, would you still block the knife for me?" "I'll protect Master's safety," Gan Hong whispered. "If it was Luochio next time, would you block it too?" Song Ying asked again. "Yes." Gan Hong didn't hesitate. "If Luochio and I were at the same time, who would you block it for?" Song Ying gritted her teeth and asked. "Of course." Gan Hong subconsciously opened her mouth to answer, but at this time, Song Ying suddenly held her face with both hands. At this time, Song Ying pressed Gan Hong down into the stream. The low and shallow stream could only reach Gan Hong's ears. She could hear the gurgling sound of the stream. At such a low level, the mist was very thin, so they could see each other's faces clearly. Look into my eyes and tell me your answer. Don't lie to me. Song Ying said softly, I'll only listen this time and ask this time. Her pinkish-purple hair scattered in the stream, and there was something hazy in Song Ying's eyes. She looked at Gan Hong, her eyes continued to move, and her voice became lower. You're the only one who can make me feel like a friend, my first friend. So, can you tell me the answer? But Gan Hong closed her eyes. Song Ying's eyes gradually dimmed. But Gan Hong suddenly stretched out her hand from the water and stroked Song Ying's cheek. She sighed and opened her eyes. It's true. Why do you always look like a child whose toy has been snatched away? The response was beyond Song Ying's expectation. Answer me. Of course, Gan Hong said, and her eyes suddenly contracted. In the blink of an eye, Song Ying only felt that her body was turned over by a huge force. Just like Gan Hong, her whole body was washed by the stream at this moment, and it was her. At this time, Gan Hong supported herself with both hands and became the one who pressed down on Song Ying. Of course, it's you. A mouthful of blood was spat out from Gan Hong's mouth. She couldn't support herself anymore and fell on Song Ying's body. And what Song Ying could see was a huge figure. Like a monster, it held a huge thick wooden stick in its hand. The hair on its body was like a mammoth, but it walked upright and seemed to have human-like facial features, a savage. The same savage that appeared in Song Howren's adventure story actually appeared in front of Song Ying's eyes at this moment. A few seconds ago, this savage waved the wooden stick in its hand and hit down fiercely. I'm just telling a story, why? Song Ying's eyes were dull at this time, and she was a little overwhelmed by the situation in front of her. Hurry up, Gan Hong, who fell on her body, said weakly at this time. She felt that her whole body had lost consciousness. The heavy blow she had just endured seemed to have broken her spine, but she gritted her teeth and said, Hurry up and leave. Hurry up. There was a voice in her heart. That time when she was in danger. Song Ying suddenly shivered. She reached out and grabbed the sharp branch that Gan Hong had thrown to the side. This time, it's my turn. You're crazy. Friends, shouldn't it be like this? Song Ying gritted her teeth and jumped up, sharing joys and sorrows, life and death together, not abandoning each other. This is what friends are like. Stop fooling around. Hurry up. You big missy. You also stop fooling around. So what if I'm the big missy? Can't I make myself regret it for the rest of my life? The savage in front of her suddenly roared at this time, that thick and long arm at this time at this time at this time, at this time at his chest, and then raised the huge wooden club in the other hand at this time. Song Ying's legs were trembling at this time, and the huge savage in front of her suddenly stopped and stared at her. I'm also the daughter of the Song family. Song Ying screamed, held the sharp branch in both hands, and directly stabbed at the long-haired savage. Unexpectedly, the long-haired savage's reaction was very fast. His hand reached out and caught the branch in his big hand. Song Ying's strength was simply not enough to contend with the long-haired savage. The branch was instantly taken away by the savage. At this time, the savage suddenly opened his big mouth, revealing a mouth of uneven big yellow teeth, as if he was laughing loudly. Song Ying was shocked. She could only think of attacking the barbarian's legs. Without hesitation, she kicked towards the barbarian's thigh and knee. She did not know any of the warriors in the village, who had extremely strong fighting abilities. She had only learned some self-defense moves. This kick not only did not make the savage retreat, but instead she felt like she had kicked an iron plate. A sharp pain came from her ankle. It was so painful that Song Ying's eyes were about to squeeze out tears. She fell into the stream. At the side, Gan Hong at this time used both hands to support her body, but her spine suffered a terrible injury, and she was unable to stand up. Seeing this, Song Ying's heart was filled with despair. She crawled with difficulty to Gan Hong's side, then pulled Gan Hong's body, and struggled to move in the stream. Don't talk, I said. I don't want to regret it for the rest of my life, even if I die. Also, don't talk to me about mature things. She almost instantly blocked the words that Gan Hong was about to say. If I leave you, I may not be able to walk out. Anyway, if I'm going to die, at least I will die with glory. Even if grandfather is sad, at least he will be proud of me. I'm the daughter of the Song family. Xiaoying, Gan Hong called in a low voice. At this time, Song Ying reached out and directly hugged Gan Hong's body and tightly closed her eyes, because at this moment, the long-haired savage had raised the big stick in his hand and ruthlessly smashed it down. Suddenly, a loud sound came from the thick fog. It seemed to be a gunshot. After hearing the gunshot, the long-haired savage suddenly let out a painful cry, and then ran into the thick fog in panic. Song Ying subconsciously opened her eyes, only to see a faint black figure gradually coming from the thick fog from afar to the edge of the stream. That was close. Are you all okay? A voice. Hearing this familiar voice and the gradually clear face, Song Ying was stunned, because the person who appeared in front of her at this time, if it was not Luoqiu, who else could it be? At this time, Luoqiu's hand was holding a hunting rifle. He looked energetic. You bastard, where did you die? Song Ying muttered subconsciously and then suddenly shivered. Gan Hong? Gan Hong is injured, hurry and save her. Can you stand up? Luoqiu suddenly asked. Song Ying gritted her teeth. Although her ankle was very painful, she still nodded. Luoqiu carried the hunting rifle in his hand on his shoulder, then walked into the stream, and carried Gan Hong up. Gan Hong said weakly, Master Chiu, you're okay. Chapter 930. She didn't know why she couldn't find her shoes, but she also couldn't find her pants. At the edge of the stream, Song Ying only found her top. At this moment, she could only put on her top in a hurry and still staggered to follow Luoqiu's footstep. Carrying a person horizontally was a very troublesome thing to do, so it didn't take long for Luoqiu to carry Gan Hong on his back. Gan Hong's willpower was very strong. She forced herself not to faint from the pain, but at this time, she didn't have the strength to speak, and her face was as pale as paper. The grass on the ground was very sharp. Not long after, Song Ying's legs had been cut by the sharp grass, and her ankle was injured when she attacked the savages, which brought great trouble to her ability to move. But she didn't say a word along the way, nor did she cry out in pain, because she was afraid that if she stopped, she would stop Luoqiu's journey, which was equivalent to putting Gan Hong in more danger. She didn't have time to ask Luoqiu how he survived and how he was still holding a shotgun in his hand. This deadhead seemed to always pretend to be mute when others didn't take the initiative to ask. It didn't take long, maybe only about 10 minutes, but Song Ying felt like half a century. Luoqiu suddenly stopped. We're here, just like this. Song Ying was stunned, and so was Gan Hong, looking forward. At this time, as Luoqiu walked a few steps forward, the two saw a house. It was roughly built with wood, and it was located on a flat ground. There was an open space around the house, surrounded by a fence, but the open space was already full of weeds, as if no one had lived here for a long time. Luoqiu carried Gan Hong in first. After opening the door, he found that the wooden house was much simpler than he imagined. There was no electricity in this place, so the tool used for lighting was firewood. At this time, a pile of firewood had been lit in a pit in the middle of the floor of the house. There was an old iron pot on the fire, with steam constantly rising from it, and something was being cooked. Luoqiu put Gan Hong down and spread some dry weeds on the ground. Then, Luoqiu found a few branches and wooden plank. He used the rope he found in the house to secure Gan Hong's back. Let's do something simple for the time being, Luoqiu said softly to Gan Hong. Gan Hong could only blink her eyes, indicating that she understood. She also understood that the conditions here were very simple, and it was already good enough that her spine could be temporarily fixed. Don't just stand there. Come to the front of the fire. Luoqiu turned around and looked at Song Ying. Although the weather is quite hot, this place is also humid. It's best to dry out, otherwise you'll catch a cold. Song Ying nodded subconsciously. She suddenly realized something. She wasn't wearing pants, and her top was actually a little short. Because of this, she couldn't help but awkwardly pull off her clothes, trying to pull them up to her thighs. Song Ying gritted his teeth, but he noticed that Luocio was no longer looking at him. Instead, he lifted the lid of the iron pot. There was some boiling water here, and Luocio began to pour it out. The vessel used looked like a cooking pot, which was probably also found in this wooden house. Wash your wounds with warm water later. Luocio moved a pot of hot water in front of Song Ying and pointed at the wounds on her legs. Thank you. Song Ying said these two words with difficulty. Thank me for what? Luocio smiled slightly. Song Ying gritted his teeth and said with great difficulty, Thank you for saving us. Luocio said, If it were me, would you save me? Yes. Gan Hong's weak voice came from behind. Luocio glanced sideways, then looked at Song Ying again. This time, she simply did not answer, but nodded. Luocio said, In that case, you don't have to thank me. Song Ying sighed. She had to admit that Luocio was the most difficult type for her to deal with. The Song family was said to be a gangster. In the process of Song Ying's growth, the people she met were basically the rough type. Although Song Haoran was a polite and gentle person, he was different from Luocio. Relatively speaking, Song Haoran was more like a ruffian, but with an elegant temperament. He could barely be described as a yuppie. I can't think about it anymore. Song Ying sighed secretly, then looked around the house and simply changed the topic. Speaking of which, what happened to you? This house and your shotgun? Luocio blinked and said, Me? Seems to be quite lucky. After falling, I was caught by a branch and didn't suffer any injuries. But it took a lot of effort to come down. How lucky? Song Ying frowned, thinking that Luocio probably fell somewhere else after being thrown out of the car when it fell off the cliff. But the place where he fell shouldn't be too far away from her and Gan Hong. This damn fog, it came at the right time. As for this house, I found it by accident. Luocio also looked around and said, This should have been there originally. I thought it was quite convenient, so I temporarily used it. Song Ying didn't hear anything wrong in his words, but she felt that something was wrong. This house is probably a hunter's residence, right? Luocio guessed. There are some hunting tools here and a shotgun. I took a look and found that it can still be used. Just now I heard a strange sound outside, so I brought it out. What did you meet just now? I thought it was quite big. Was it a bear? You didn't even know what it was and you dared to shoot? Song Ying was stunned. Luocio curiously asked, Shouldn't I shoot? This. Song Ying shook her head, Forget it. But I think you don't want to know what it is. I'm afraid you won't believe it even if I tell you. Luocio chuckled. If there are zombies and Mr. Blind who can play with flying swords, I think I can still accept it. Song Ying said, It's a savage with long hair, holding a big stick and infinite strength. I see. Luocio nodded and then didn't say anything. After a while, Gan Hong, who was lying behind, suddenly closed her eyes. Song Ying nervously crawled to Gan Hong's side, her hand trembling as she checked Gan Hong's breath. It's better to faint temporarily rather than force it. At least it's a kind of relaxation for the brain. Luocio said softly. At the same time, there was a piece of cloth soaked in hot water in his hand. Let me do it. Song Ying directly took the hot cloth from Luocio's hand, and then began to carefully wipe Gan Hong's cheek. Are you hungry? I made something to eat. Luocio suddenly said at this time. Food. Song Ying was stunned, and subconsciously looked at Luocio. In fact, there was a place similar to a kitchen in this house. The fire pit in the center was probably used for heating and boiling water. Luocio now walked to the front of a stove. The fire in the stove was not extinguished, and after opening the lid of the pot, a strong fragrance could be smelled. Soon after, Luocio used a wooden bowl to put some food in the pot in front of Song Ying. She glanced at it. It was probably something like a stew or borscht soup. Song Ying couldn't help but frown and said strangely, "This place seems to have been uninhabited for at least a dozen years. Where did you get the food?" "There are some wild vegetables outside, you can eat them," Luoqiu said indifferently. "As for the seasoning, I found some sugar and salt in the house. Why? Is there a problem? I can't run from here to the market to buy the food and then come back here." Thinking about it, it was true, Song Ying really couldn't resist her hunger, so she had to pick up the bowl of stewed food, and then took a small sip, and then began to gulp it down, so much so that she almost burned her tongue because of it. It must be because she was too hungry. Even if it was the leftovers from last night, she could still eat it very happily. So it was definitely not because of the taste. How could it be so delicious? However, was it really possible to find so many edible wild herbs in such a desolate place? What's the matter with the corn kernels? And the onions? Seeing Luoqiu go to the stove again and continue to fill another bowl, Song Ying actually admired this guy's ability. "You seem to be very good at survival skills in the wild. Aren't you afraid of the poisonous mushrooms in the pot?" Luoqiu said indifferently, "When I was a child, I went to a 2-person summer camp with my father during a summer vacation. I learned some skills at that time." "A 2-person summer camp?" Song Ying was startled. Luoqiu said, "I don't remember the details, I was quite young at that time. My father probably had a friend who invited him to do something. It seemed to be an army stationed in a big forest. Then, my father was afraid that I wouldn't do anything during the summer vacation, so he simply took me with him. It was quite an interesting experience. Speaking of which, I seem to remember meeting a little girl who was lost. I don't know what happened to her later." This plot is a bit familiar. Song Ying looked at Luoqiu strangely and suddenly joked, "Then the little girl remembered you deeply in her heart and couldn't forget you for many years. No matter how excellent a man is, he can never replace you. One day, she finally met the little boy from that year, so she began to pursue him intensely, something like that?" "Do you like to read comics?" Luoqiu suddenly asked. Song Ying pouted and snorted coldly. "None of your business." "Do you still want to eat?" Luoqiu said with a smile. Thus, Song Ying reluctantly pushed out the second wooden bowl that had been emptied with difficulty. Luoqiu directly took it and then said, "Later, feed Ganhong some food, it's actually good to replenish her strength." "Got it." Song Ying nodded. Actually, apart from this guy's loathsome stoic face, he was quite good in other aspects. At the very least, he wasn't that lecherous. After feeding her some food, Ganhong looked better, but perhaps it was just an illusion, because she still hadn't woken up. Song Ying was physically and mentally exhausted, hugging her knees as she sat beside the fire. Her clothes had long been dried. She rested her head on her knees, silently looking at Ganhong. She had been like this for quite some time. The thick white fog outside had mostly dissipated, and now there was only a thin layer, barely able to see into the distance. The sound of wood being chopped could be heard outside the house. Luoqiu said he planned to start a fire outside the house to make smoke. If there were rescuers, they should be able to see the smoke. It was a very good idea. As for why there was firewood in the wooden house that had been abandoned for many years, Song Ying didn't have any idea. After a while, Luoqiu walked in. "The fire is already lit, we just have to wait." "Okay." Song Ying casually responded. Luoqiu used a wooden cup to fill it with boiled water. "Drink some?" "Okay." Song Ying took it, but only held it with both hands, and didn't intend to drink. But she suddenly asked, "You really don't plan to stay in the Song family for a long time?" Luoqiu asked in return, "Putting aside the relationship with Master Song, your own wish, isn't it that you want me to leave as soon as possible?" Song Ying was speechless for a moment. Indeed, her attitude had always been lukewarm, and even a little hostile. But after she had personally verified that Luoqiu was indeed a descendant of the Song family, it became a little subtle. The education of the Song family was very strict, especially in the education of kinship and friendship. It was a pity that Song Ing didn't have her own peers, and she had always been alone in this generation. All of a sudden, do you know why I suddenly pulled you out to race last night? Song Ing looked at Luochio at this time. What you said to me in the car. Luochio thought for a while. You suddenly want me to stay. Why? Is it because of your grandfather that you can even accept someone you hate? I don't hate him, actually. Song Ing didn't look at Luochio this time. Although I don't like him, I always feel that I can accept him. Don't think too much. I just think that if there is one more person in the Song family now, at least it's a good thing. People are more selfish, at least they would rather share things with their relatives than to let outsiders benefit. Grandfather has always been looking forward to the Song family to have more descendants. I don't need these things. Luochio shook his head. Leaving or not, in fact, it won't affect my relationship with the Song family. Since this blood relationship exists, then I think, whether I stay or not, what does it matter? Since ancient times, brothers will separate and form their own families. There is no need to live together, right? Anyway, you don't plan to stay, right? Song Ing suddenly said. Luochio nodded directly. Song Ing bit at this time and suddenly said, What if grandfather insists on marrying me to you? Luochio opened his mouth. Grandfather Song really has this plan? And it seems that he has discussed this with Song Ing? In this case, Song Ing suddenly pulled him out to race last night seemed to be traceable. And in the car, her words seemed to be a little unfinished. Could it be that she was talking about this matter?